The gunshot echoed across frozen mountains as Martha Calloway pressed her bleeding hand against the cabin door, three armed men closing in behind her through knee-deep snow. She'd stolen evidence that could destroy the most powerful man in Montana territory, and now she was about to freeze to death before anyone ever learned the truth. But this story isn't about dying in the wilderness. It's about a woman's society called Worthless becoming the most dangerous person in the frontier. Stay until the end to hear how Martha burned down a silver empire, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The wind cut like broken glass across the Bitterroot Mountains, and Martha Calloway was going to die out here. She knew it with the same certainty she'd known everything else the world had decided about her, that she was too big, too plain, too unmarriageable for anyone decent. Except Edwin Voss had wanted her anyway, not because he loved her, because her father owed him money. Martha's boots punched through another drift, snow swallowing her legs up to the knees. Her dress, the expensive silk monstrosity Voss had ordered for their engagement party, was shredded below the hem, frozen stiff as canvas. The satchel strapped across her chest banged against her ribs with each stumbling step. Inside it was the only thing that mattered anymore: the ledger. She'd found it 3 nights ago in Voss's study while the household staff prepared for the wedding. Just sitting there in an unlocked drawer like he was so powerful, nobody would dare look. Page after page of payoffs to judges, claims jumped through murder, miners who disappeared after asking too many questions about safety violations. Martha had stared at those pages until her hands shook. Then she'd stolen the ledger, climbed out a second-story window in her nightgown, and run. That was 48 hours ago, or maybe 72. Time got strange when you were freezing to death. Another gust nearly knocked her sideways. Martha caught herself against a pine tree, bark scraping her palm raw. Her fingers had stopped hurting an hour ago, which she figured was probably bad. Everything was bad now. The storm had swallowed the trail completely. She couldn't see 10 feet in any direction through the whiteout. Behind her, maybe a mile back, she'd heard gunshots. Voss's men. Had to be. He wouldn't let her go. Wouldn't let anyone walk away carrying proof of what he really was. Martha forced herself forward. Her thighs burned. They always burned, even before she'd been climbing mountains in a blizzard. Years of being too heavy for horses, too large for fashionable dresses, too much for any man who wasn't buying her like livestock. The burning in her legs was familiar. She'd lived with that shame her whole life. This was just a different kind of burning. "Keep moving," she whispered. Her voice sounded wrong, slurred. "Just keep—" Her boot hit ice under the snow. The world tilted, and suddenly Martha was falling, tumbling down a slope she hadn't even seen. Rocks hammered into her shoulders and spine. The satchel strap tried to strangle her. She threw her arms over her head and just fell, waiting for her skull to crack open on granite. She stopped in a snowbank so deep it swallowed her whole. For a few seconds, Martha just lay there, tasting blood. Something in her side screamed when she breathed. Broken rib, maybe. Or just bruised. Did it matter? The snow was actually warmer than the wind, softer, almost comfortable. "This would be easier," part of her whispered. "Just stay here. Let it end." Nobody would miss her. Her mother had died when Martha was 12, and her father had spent the last 8 years trying to marry her off to anyone with money. When that failed, he'd sold her to Voss to clear his gambling debts. No love there. No friends either. The other society women had made sure of that with their whispers and cutting smiles. Martha had been alone her entire life. Maybe dying alone made sense. Her fingers brushed the satchel, the ledger. Voss had killed 17 people that she could prove. 17 names in neat handwriting marked as resolved or handled. One of them was a woman named Sarah Chen who'd tried to organize the Chinese miners. Another was a 14-year-old boy who'd seen too much at the wrong claim site. If Martha died out here, those people stayed dead and forgotten. Voss kept killing. Nothing changed. "No," Martha said into the snow. "No, fuck that." She dragged herself upright. Everything hurt. That was fine. She'd been hurting for years. Pain was just noise. The slope had dumped her into a narrow ravine, walls of rock rising on both sides. Trees clustered thick here, breaking the worst of the wind. Martha staggered forward, using trunks to keep herself upright. Her legs felt like someone else's legs. Her dress was frozen solid now, hem scraping the snow like armor. How far had she come from Helena? 50 miles? 100? The mining camp foreman who'd sold her the horse before it threw her and bolted yesterday had said something about old trapping territory. Empty country. Nobody out here but animals and maybe a few hermits too mean to die. Martha's vision blurred. She blinked and ice cracked on her eyelashes. Not yet, she told herself. Just a little further. But further where? She was lost. The storm wasn't stopping. Even if Voss's men lost her trail, the cold would finish the job. Her boot caught on something, a root, a rock, and this time when she fell, she didn't get back up. The snow accepted her like a bed. Martha's cheek pressed against ice, and she watched her breath fog white in front of her face. Each exhale a little shallower than the last. She thought about her mother. Not the sickness at the end, but before. Teaching Martha to read, to do figures, to argue like a lawyer, even though women weren't supposed to argue at all. "You're smart, baby girl," her mother used to say. "Don't let them convince you otherwise just because you don't look like their dolls." But smart didn't matter when you were freezing to death in the Bitterroots. Martha's eyes drifted closed. She didn't hear the footsteps crunching through snow, didn't feel the shadow that fell across her. Only knew something had changed when a voice spoke, low, rough, like stones grinding together. Jesus Christ. Hands touched her shoulder and Martha tried to scream. Nothing came out but a wheeze. She thrashed weakly, fighting on instinct because every man who'd ever touched her had been cruel. "Easy." The voice again, closer. "I'm not gonna hurt you." Strong arms slid under her knees and shoulders, lifting her like she weighed nothing. That should have been impossible. Martha knew exactly how much she weighed, had been reminded of it constantly. But whoever was carrying her didn't grunt or struggle, just held her steady against a chest that felt like a furnace. "Stay awake," the voice said. "Don't close your eyes." But Martha was so tired, and the warmth spreading from the stranger's body was too good to resist. She let the darkness take her. Consciousness came back in pieces. Heat first. Overwhelming, shocking heat, after so much cold that Martha's body jerked involuntarily. She tried to curl away from it and couldn't. Something held her pinned. "Hold still," that grinding stone voice. "You're hypothermic. Body needs to warm slow or your heart stops." Martha's eyes cracked open. Firelight. Rough log walls. A ceiling made of split timber with snow sliding off it in wet clumps. She was lying on something soft, furs, she realized, piled thick beneath and over her. The heat came from a stone fireplace taking up most of one wall, flames roaring like they wanted to devour the whole mountain. And sitting on a stool near the fire, watching her with eyes the color of winter storms, was the biggest man Martha had ever seen. Not fat big, though she knew that size intimately. This was height and muscle, shoulders broad enough to block half the firelight. His hair was dark, long enough to tie back, shot through with gray at the temples. Scars cut across his face, one through his left eyebrow, another along his jaw. He wore buckskin and wool, practical frontier clothes that had seen hard use. When their eyes met, Martha's first instinct was to apologize for existing. She swallowed it. She was done apologizing. "Where am I?" Her voice came out wrecked, throat raw from screaming into the wind. "My cabin." The man didn't move. "About 30 miles north of where you collapsed. Found you half dead in Blackfoot Ravine." 30 miles. He'd carried her 30 miles through a blizzard. Martha tried to sit up, pain lanced through her side, and she gasped, falling back against the furs. "Broken rib," the man said. "Maybe 2. Wrapped you best I could, but you need to stay still." "How long?" 2 days. Storm's still going. Nobody's moving through these mountains right now." 2 days unconscious. Martha's hand flew to her chest, searching for, "Your bag's over there." The man nodded to a table near the wall. "Didn't go through it. None of my business." The satchel sat exactly where he'd pointed, straps coiled neatly, still closed, still safe. Relief hit so hard Martha's eyes stung. "Thank you," she whispered. The man grunted. He stood, and sweet Jesus, he was even bigger upright. 6.5 feet easy, maybe more. He crossed to the fireplace and pulled a pot off a hook, ladling something into a wooden bowl. "Venison stew," he said, bringing it over. "You need food. Haven't eaten in 3 days from the look of you." He held the bowl out, but when Martha tried to take it, her hands shook too badly. Broth sloshed over the rim. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the man pulled the stool closer and sat. He scooped stew onto a wooden spoon and held it to Martha's lips like she was a child. She should have been humiliated, should have felt the familiar burn of shame that came with being helpless, with being a burden. But something in this man's face stopped her. He wasn't looking at her with pity or disgust, just patience. Like he'd sit here all day if that's what it took. Martha took the spoon. The stew was rich, gamey, heavily salted. Best thing she'd ever tasted. She ate 3 more spoonfuls before her stomach cramped and she had to stop. "That's good," the man said. "Too much, too fast makes you sick. Sleep some more. Try again later." He set the bowl aside and stood to leave. "Wait," Martha said. "What's your name?" He paused at the edge of the firelight. "Gideon Hale." "I'm Martha. Martha Calloway." Gideon studied her with those storm gray eyes. "You running from something, Martha Calloway?" Every instinct screamed to lie. Make up a story. Keep the truth hidden like she'd hidden everything else her whole life. But Gideon had carried her 30 miles through a blizzard, had kept her alive when the wilderness wanted her dead. Maybe he'd earned some truth. "Yes," Martha said quietly. "I'm running." Gideon nodded once. "Then you're safe here. Nobody finds this cabin unless I want them to." He walked to the far corner where another pile of furs made a rough bed. Lay down with his back to her, rifle within arm's reach. Martha watched the fire shadows dance across the ceiling. Outside, wind hammered the cabin, but the walls held steady. Strong, built to last. She touched her side where the ribs were wrapped. Gideon had undressed her, had to bind the injury. Had seen her body, all of it, everything she'd spent her life being ashamed of. And he'd wrapped her broken ribs, fed her stew, and asked no questions except whether she was running. Martha pulled the furs closer and let exhaustion drag her back under. For the first time in 3 days, she felt almost safe. She woke to the smell of coffee. Real coffee, not the chicory-stretched nonsense most people drank. The scent alone was enough to drag Martha fully conscious. She sat up carefully, testing her ribs. Still hurt like hell, but she could breathe without wanting to scream. Progress. Gideon stood at the fireplace, working a cast-iron pot. Morning light leaked through gaps in the shuttered windows, weak and gray, but light nonetheless. The storm was still raging outside. She could hear it battering the cabin like an angry drunk. "Storm like this usually lasts a week," Gideon said without turning around. "You picked a hell of a time to run through the mountains." Martha swung her legs off the furs. Someone, Gideon, obviously, had dressed her in a wool shirt that hung to her knees. Her ruined dress was draped near the fire, still damp, probably unsalvageable. "Wasn't exactly planning it," she said. "Most people don't plan to die of exposure. Still happens." He poured coffee into a tin cup and brought it over. Martha took it, wrapping both hands around the heat. The first sip burned her tongue and tasted like heaven. "You got a place to go?" Gideon asked, after the storm. Did she? Helena was out. Voss owned that town. Her father's house was worse than nothing. She had no friends, no family, no money except the few dollars she'd grabbed during her escape. "I'll figure something out," Martha said. Gideon made a sound that might have been skepticism. He crossed to the table and started working on something with a knife. Carving, she realized. Wood shavings curled onto the floor as he shaped what looked like a handle for something. They sat in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable silence, just quiet. The kind Martha had never experienced around other people. Usually there were expectations, conversations she was supposed to make, ways she was supposed to act, but Gideon didn't seem to want anything from her. It was strange, unsettling even. "Why do you live out here?" Martha asked finally. Gideon's knife paused for half a second. Then he went back to carving. "Don't like people much." "Why not?" "People ask too many questions." Martha almost smiled. "Fair enough." More silence. Wind howled against the shutters. The fire crackled and spat. "Were you in the war?" Martha asked, because she'd seen scars like his before. Her father's business partner had them. Knife wounds and bullet holes that only came from close fighting. "Yeah." "Which side?" "Union. Colorado Cavalry. Then Special Scouts." Gideon's voice was flat, emotionless. "Did things that needed doing. Came up here after because I was tired of killing." He said it so plainly, like he just admitted to being tired of farming or tired of town life. But Martha heard what he wasn't saying, the weight underneath those words. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. War's over. I survived. That's more than most." He stood abruptly, crossing to a cabinet near the back wall, pulled out strips of dried meat and hard biscuits, bringing them to Martha. "Eat," he said. Slowly, ribs need protein to heal. Martha took the food, chewing carefully. The dried venison was tough, heavily smoked. The biscuits were harder than rocks, but it was fuel, and her body needed fuel. "How'd you end up out there?" Gideon asked. "Middle of nowhere, no coat, dressed like you were going to a party?" Martha swallowed, set down the biscuit. Here it was, the moment she had to decide how much to tell. She looked at Gideon, really looked at him, saw the scars, the hard-earned solitude, the way he kept his rifle close. This was a man who understood running, who understood hiding from things that wanted to destroy you. "I was supposed to get married," Martha said quietly, "to a man named Edwin Voss." Gideon's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. "The Silver Man. You know him?" "Know of him. Owns half of Helena, bought the other half. Men like that don't stay secret long." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "Why'd you run?" Martha's hand drifted to the satchel still sitting on the table. "Because I found out what he really is," she said, "and I took something that proves it." She expected questions, expected Gideon to demand details, to tell her she was stupid for stealing from Edwin Voss. Instead, he just nodded slowly. "That why armed men were tracking through the mountains 3 days ago?" Martha's blood went cold. "You saw them." "Heard them. 4 riders, maybe 5, moving south through Copper Creek Pass before the storm hit full force. Lost their trail after that." Gideon's jaw tightened. "Figured they were hunting someone. Didn't know it was you." 4 or 5 men. Voss had sent a whole hunting party. "They'll come here," Martha whispered. "When the storm breaks, they'll keep searching and—" "No." Gideon's voice cut through her panic like an axe through wood. "They won't find this cabin. I've been up here 6 years. Nobody finds this place unless I let them." "You don't understand. Edwin Voss doesn't stop. I don't care who Edwin Voss is." Gideon leaned forward, and Martha saw something dangerous flicker behind his eyes. "Long as you're in this cabin, you're under my protection. That's how it works out here." Something in Martha's chest cracked open. Not fear this time. Something else. Something that felt almost like hope. "Why?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Gideon was quiet for a long moment. His scarred hands rested on his knees, fingers laced together. "Found you half dead in the snow," he said finally. "Could have left you there. Didn't. That means something in the mountains. Means I'm responsible now." "I'm not your responsibility." "Maybe not. But you're here, and I'm not the kind of man who throws people back into the cold." He stood, ending the conversation, crossed to the door, and started pulling on a heavy coat lined with fur. "Where are you going?" Martha asked. "Check the traps, see if anything's stupid enough to be out in this weather." He shrugged into the coat, then grabbed the rifle. "Keep the fire going. Don't open the door for anyone. I'll be back in an hour." Then he was gone, cold air rushing in before the door slammed shut. Martha sat alone in the cabin, listening to the storm, holding a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm. For the first time in her life, someone had called her their responsibility, and it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a promise. The days blurred together. Storm kept raging. Snow piled higher against the cabin walls until the windows were half buried. Gideon went out twice a day, morning and evening, to check his trap lines and hunt. He always came back with something. Rabbits, mostly. Once a small deer that he butchered in the lean-to attached to the cabin, efficient as a surgeon. Martha's ribs healed slowly. The first few days she could barely move without gasping, but Gideon had set her broken bones before. His own, he said, and other soldiers during the war. He knew what he was doing. He also knew how to cook, how to preserve meat, how to make a cabin built for one person stretched to accommodate 2. He never complained about the extra mouth to feed, never made Martha feel like she was taking up too much space, using too much food, being too much trouble. It was the strangest thing she'd ever experienced. On the 4th day, Martha insisted on helping. "You should rest," Gideon said. "I've been resting for 4 days. I'll lose my mind if I just lie here." He considered that, then nodded. Fire needs tending. Wood needs splitting. You're strong enough to carry logs? Martha thought about all the times she'd been told she wasn't strong enough, wasn't capable, should just sit still and look pretty, except she couldn't even do that right, could she? I can carry logs, she said. Gideon showed her the wood pile in the lean-to, protected from the worst of the weather, showed her how to select the right size pieces, how to stack them near the fireplace so they'd dry properly. It was simple work, physical work. Martha loved it. Her muscles burned, but this was a good burn, useful. She carried armload after armload, stacking them carefully while Gideon worked on repairing a snowshoe frame that had cracked. You're strong, he said after watching her haul the 6th load. Not a question, just an observation. Martha waited for the punchline. The joke about how, of course she was strong, look at her, all that weight had to be good for something. It never came. Farm work, she said instead. Before my mother died, we had land outside Helena. I helped with everything, hauling water, moving feed, fixing fences. Father sold it all after she passed, but I remember. Gideon nodded. Good skills to have. Better than most society women. Society women thought I was a disgrace. Society women are idiots. It came out so matter-of-fact that Martha actually laughed. The sound startled her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed. Really laughed. Not the fake tinkling thing she'd learned to do at parties. Gideon glanced at her, and something that might have been a smile tugged at his scarred mouth. Then he went back to his repairs. That night, Martha cooked dinner. Gideon had shown her where he kept the supplies, salt, flour, dried herbs he'd gathered himself. She made stew from the rabbit he'd caught, stretching it with root vegetables from the cellar he'd dug under the cabin floor. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot and filling, and when Gideon took his first bite, he made an approving sound. Good, he said. 2 letters. 1 word. But Martha felt it like a victory. They ate in comfortable silence, wind battering the cabin walls. After, Gideon cleaned the dishes while Martha added wood to the fire. Tell me about the ledger, he said. Martha's hand stilled on the log she'd been positioning. You don't have to, Gideon added, but if Voss is sending men after you, I should know what we're dealing with. We. Like they were in this together. Martha sat down on her pile of furs, pulling her knees up. Gideon's shirt was long enough to stay decent. He settled onto his stool, waiting. Edwin Voss runs most of the silver operations in Montana Territory, Martha began. Everyone knows that. What they don't know is how he got so powerful. She paused. He kills people. Anyone who gets in his way. Miners who organize, claim jumpers he wants gone, business rivals. Then he bribes judges to look the other way. How'd you find out? I wasn't supposed to. Voss wanted to marry me because my father owed him money, gambling debts. I was just payment. The familiar shame tried to rise up, but Martha pushed it down. He didn't love me. Barely looked at me except to make sure I was doing what he wanted. I was supposed to be grateful some rich man was willing to marry the fat girl nobody else wanted. Gideon's expression darkened, but he stayed quiet. 3 nights before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. Went to his study looking for a book, something to read. Found the ledger in his desk, just sitting there, unlocked. Martha laughed bitterly. He was that confident, that sure nobody would dare cross him. What's in it? Names, dates, payoffs, 17 murders documented in detail, dozens of bribes, judges, sheriffs, federal marshals, proof of claim jumping, of hiring men to cause mine collapses so he could buy properties cheap. Martha's hands clenched. There was a woman named Sarah Chen. She tried to organize the Chinese workers, get them safer conditions. Voss had her killed and made it look like an accident. She had 3 children. Christ, Gideon muttered. There was a boy, 14 years old. Saw something he shouldn't have at a claim site. They buried him in the mine shaft and told his mother he'd run away. Martha's voice cracked. 17 people. That I could count. Probably more that didn't make it into the book. Gideon was very still. The firelight played across his scars, making them look even deeper. So you took it, he said. So I took it, climbed out a window in the middle of the night and ran. Bought a horse from a camp foreman with the last money I had. Horse threw me the first day. I walked the rest. And Voss sent men after you. Of course he did. That ledger could destroy him. Get him hanged. He'll tear the territory apart before he lets it see daylight. Silence settled heavy between them. Outside, the wind screamed like something dying. "What were you planning to do with it?" Gideon asked, "before you nearly froze to death?" Martha had thought about that question a lot while lying in the snow, waiting to die. "I don't know," she admitted. "Find someone trustworthy, I guess. A federal marshal, maybe. Someone Voss doesn't own." She laughed without humor. "Except I don't know who that is. For all I know, he owns everyone." Gideon stood, crossed to the table where the satchel sat. He didn't touch it, just looked at it for a long moment. "There's a judge in Helena," he said slowly. "Marcus Brennan. Union man during the war, lost his son at Antietam. He's honest, one of the few who can't be bought." "You know him?" "Served with his son. Wrote him after the battle, told him how the boy died. He wrote back. We've kept in touch. Letters, mostly." Martha's heart beat faster. "You think he'd help?" "Maybe. If we could get the ledger to him. If we could prove it's real." Gideon turned to face her. "But getting to Helena means going back into the world, back where Voss's men are hunting." "I know. They'll kill you if they catch you." "I know that too." Gideon studied her for a long moment. Martha met his eyes, refusing to look away. "Why risk it?" he asked quietly. "You could stay here. Storm will break eventually. You could head north, start over somewhere Voss's reach doesn't extend. Forget the ledger, forget Helena, just disappear." Part of Martha wanted that, wanted to take the easy way out, save herself, let someone else fight Voss. But then she thought about Sarah Chen's 3 children, about a 14-year-old boy buried in a mine shaft, about 17 people who'd died because one man wanted more money and power. "Because if I run, those people stay dead and forgotten," Martha said, "and Voss keeps killing. I can't." She swallowed hard. "I can't live with that. I won't." Something shifted in Gideon's face. Respect, maybe, or recognition, like he'd seen that same stubborn refusal to quit in someone else once. "All right," he said. "Then we wait for the storm to break. Then we figure out how to get you to Helena alive." "We?" Martha asked. "You think I'm letting you walk back into that mess alone?" Gideon's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. "I pulled you out of the snow. That makes you my problem now." "I'm not your problem." "You keep saying that. Doesn't make it true." He moved back to his corner, settling onto his furs. But before he lay down, he looked at Martha one more time. "Get some sleep," he said. "Storm breaks in a few days. Things are going to get complicated fast." Martha lay back, staring at the ceiling. Her ribs still ached. Her body still carried all the weight the world had mocked her for. She was still being hunted by one of the most dangerous men in Montana Territory. But for the first time in her entire life, Martha Calloway didn't feel alone. And that changed everything. The storm broke on the 7th day. Martha woke to silence, the kind that only comes after days of relentless wind. No howling, no snow battering the shutters, just the quiet creak of timber settling and the snap of fire. She sat up carefully, testing her ribs. Still tender, but the sharp pain had dulled to a persistent ache. Gideon was already awake, standing at the window with the shutters cracked open. Gray morning light cut across his face. "It's over," he said without turning around. Martha joined him at the window. Outside, the world had transformed into something unrecognizable. Snow buried everything, drifts 10 feet high against the cabin walls, trees bent nearly double under the weight. The sky was pale and clear, brittle as glass, beautiful and deadly. "How long before Voss's men start moving again?" she asked. "They already are, or they're dead." Gideon closed the shutter. Men stupid enough to get caught in the high country during a storm like that, half probably didn't make it. "And the other half?" "Will be coming this direction soon as they can dig themselves out." He crossed to the fireplace, pouring coffee from the pot that seemed to always be brewing. "We've got maybe 2 days before they reach this area, 3 if we're lucky." Martha's stomach clenched. 2 days. After a week of feeling almost safe, reality was crashing back in. "Then we need to leave." "Not yet." Gideon handed her a cup. "Snow's too deep. Try to move through that, and you'll be dead in half a mile. We wait another day, let it settle, and compact. Then we move. A day might be too late. Might be. But leaving now is suicide." His eyes met hers. I've traveled these mountains in winter. I know what I'm doing. Trust me. Trust. Such a small word. Martha had stopped trusting people years ago. It hurt less that way. But Gideon had earned it, hadn't he? Had kept her alive when she should have died. All right, she said. One more day. Gideon nodded. Then I teach you what you need to know. What do you mean? You're soft. City soft. He said it without cruelty, just fact. The mountains don't care about that. If we're traveling together, you need to be able to handle yourself. Pull your weight. Something prickled in Martha's chest, the old defensiveness rising up automatically. I've been pulling my weight here just fine. In a cabin with a fire and walls, that's different than 3 days through the backcountry in snow. Gideon set down his cup. I'm not trying to insult you. I'm trying to keep you alive. There's a difference. Martha swallowed her anger. He was right, damn him. She'd barely survived 3 days in the mountains before, and that was during autumn. Winter was a different beast entirely. What do I need to learn? She asked. Gideon almost smiled. Everything. He started with the basics, how to dress in layers without restricting movement, how to wrap her feet properly so the cold couldn't creep in through her boots, how to recognize frostbite before it took fingers or toes. Pain means you're still feeling, he said, demonstrating how to tie leather strips around boot tops to keep snow out. Numbness means you're dying. Never ignore numbness. Then he took her outside. The cold hit like a physical blow. Martha gasped and Gideon caught her arm. Breathe through your nose, he said. Air's so cold it'll freeze your lungs if you gulp it. Small breaths. Let your body adjust. Martha did as he said. After a few moments, the shock faded to something manageable. Painful, but manageable. Gideon led her around the cabin, showing her how to read the snow, where it was solid enough to walk on, where it would collapse and swallow you whole, how to spot ice beneath powder, how to find your bearings when everything looked the same. Mountains kill people who get lost, he said, pointing to a cluster of peaks barely visible through the trees. That's north, Storm Ridge. Always keep it on your left when you're heading south. Lose sight of it, you're turned around. They spent an hour just walking circles around the cabin, Gideon teaching Martha how to move efficiently through deep snow without exhausting herself, how to use her body weight, how to pick her path. You're stronger than you think, he said, after she'd hauled herself out of a drift for the 3rd time. Problem is you don't believe it yet. I know I'm strong. No, you know you can do work. That's different. Gideon stopped, turning to face her. Strong isn't about how much you can lift, it's about how much you can survive. And you survived a week in these mountains. Most men couldn't do that. The words settled into Martha's chest, warm despite the cold. They went back inside when her fingers started going numb. Gideon made her strip down to her underclothes and checked her extremities for frostbite. His touch was clinical, impersonal, fingertips pressing against her toes, her fingers looking for discoloration. You're good, he said, but you push too hard. Tomorrow, we go slower. We don't have time to go slower. We don't have time for you to lose toes to frostbite either. He handed her dry wool socks. Put these on. Warm up by the fire. Martha did, grateful for the heat. Her body ached in new places, thighs burning from the high-stepping walk through snow, shoulders sore from keeping her balance. But it was a good ache, a useful one. Gideon started preparing dinner. More venison, some kind of root vegetable he'd stored in the cellar. Martha watched him work, economical and precise. Everything he did had purpose. No wasted movement, no hesitation. How long have you been alone up here? She asked. 6 years, since the war ended. That's a long time. Yeah. He didn't elaborate. Martha waited, but Gideon stayed quiet. She'd learned his silences by now. Some were comfortable, some were walls. This one was a wall. Do you ever miss it? She tried. Being around people? No. Immediate, definitive. Then after a pause, people are complicated. Mountains aren't. I prefer simple. I'm people. And I'm pretty complicated. Gideon glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. You're different. How? He turned back to the pot, stirring slowly. You don't expect anything. Most people come into your life wanting something. Your time, your help, your compliance. You just exist. Don't ask for more than you need. I took over your cabin for a week. I offered. That's different than taking. He ladled stew into bowls. Besides, you're useful. Good cook. Hard worker. Don't complain. I've had worse company. Coming from Gideon, that was practically a declaration of friendship. They ate together, the silence comfortable again. Outside, the sun was setting, early, the way it did in winter mountains. The sky turned the color of a bruise. Tomorrow I'll teach you how to shoot, Gideon said suddenly. Martha looked up. What? The rifle. And the pistol. You need to know how. He set down his empty bowl. Voss's men won't hesitate if they find you. You need to be able to defend yourself. The thought of actually shooting someone made Martha's stomach turn, but she'd already decided she wasn't running anymore. Wasn't backing down. All right, she said. Teach me. That night, Martha couldn't sleep. She lay on her furs, listening to Gideon's steady breathing from the other corner. The fire had burned down to embers, casting barely any light. Outside, something moved through the trees. An animal, probably. Deer or elk. Her mind wouldn't stop circling back to what was coming. The journey to Helena, Voss's men hunting her, the very real possibility that she'd die before ever getting the ledger to someone who could use it. She thought about the names in that book. Sarah Chen, the 14-year-old boy, 16 others whose families probably still didn't know the truth. You awake? Gideon's voice, low and rough. Martha startled. Yeah. Can hear you thinking from over here. Despite everything, Martha almost laughed. Sorry. Don't be. Rustling as Gideon shifted. Hard to sleep before a fight. Always was. Is that what this is? A fight? That's what it'll become. A pause. You scared? Martha considered lying, decided against it. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp, makes you careful. More rustling, then footsteps. Gideon settled onto the floor near her furs, back against the wall. Close enough to talk without shouting, far enough to stay proper. Fearless people get killed fast. You don't seem afraid of anything. I'm afraid of plenty, just good at hiding it. He was quiet for a moment. Afraid of getting you killed, mostly. The admission surprised her. Martha rolled onto her side to face him, though she could barely see his outline in the dark. You're not responsible for keeping me alive, she said. Already had this argument. I lost. Gideon, I pulled you out of that snow. His voice was rough, almost angry. That means something. Means I don't get to just walk away if things get bad. Means I see this through until you're safe or I'm dead. That's the deal. I never asked for that deal. Doesn't matter, it's the deal you got. Martha's throat tightened. Nobody had ever fought for her before. Nobody had ever cared enough to try. Why? She whispered. You don't even know me. Gideon was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, had a sister once, Elizabeth. She was different. Too loud, too opinionated, too much of everything society said women shouldn't be. Our father tried to beat it out of her. Didn't work, just made her meaner. His voice went distant. She ran away when she was 16. Took off in the middle of winter, just like you. I tried to find her. Tracked her for 3 days before the trail went cold. Martha's heart clenched. What happened? Found her body come spring, frozen to death in a ravine about 20 miles from home. The pain in his voice was old, scarred over, but still there. She'd almost made it to the next town. Almost got free. Just needed someone to help her across that last stretch. I'm sorry. Don't be. Wasn't your fault. Gideon shifted and Martha heard the leather of his vest creak. But when I found you out there, half dead in the snow, felt like getting a second chance. Like maybe I could do right this time. I'm not your sister. No, you're not. But you're running from the same kind of men who drove her away. Men who think women are property. Who think they can do whatever they want because they've got money and power. His voice hardened. I couldn't save Elizabeth, but I can help you, and I will. Martha's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing to cry. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Haven't gotten you to Helena alive. Still, thank you. They sat in silence for a while. The fire popped, sending up a small shower of sparks. Outside, wind whispered through the pines, gentler now, almost peaceful. You should sleep, Gideon said finally. Tomorrow's going to be hard. He stood to go back to his corner, but Martha's voice stopped him. Gideon? Will you tell me about her? Elizabeth? He paused, then slowly settled back down against the wall. She had red hair, he said, bright red, like copper. Hated it because other kids teased her, but it was beautiful. His voice softened with memory. She used to catch frogs down by the creek and put them in our father's boots. Made me promise not to tell, and I never did, even when he tanned my hide for it. Martha smiled in the darkness. Gideon talked for an hour, maybe more. Stories about his sister, about growing up in Colorado before the war, about learning to trap and hunt from an old mountain man who'd taken him in after his enlistment ended. Martha listened, watching the dying fire paint shadows across his scarred face. And somewhere in the middle of a story about Elizabeth stealing a pie from a church social, she fell asleep. When she woke at dawn, Gideon was already up, checking his rifle. The next day and a half passed in a blur of preparation. Gideon taught Martha how to load and fire both the rifle and his spare pistol, an old army Colt that kicked hard enough to bruise her palm. She missed more than she hit, but Gideon said that was normal. Just point and shoot if it comes to it, he said. Don't think, don't aim fancy. Just point at the biggest part of the target and pull the trigger. He showed her how to pack supplies for travel, how to distribute weight so it wouldn't throw off her balance, how to eat snow for water without making herself sick. Small amounts, he said. Let it melt in your mouth first, otherwise you'll freeze from the inside out. Martha absorbed everything like a sponge. She'd spent her whole life learning useless things, how to curtsy, how to arrange flowers, how to laugh at men's jokes even when they weren't funny. This was different. This was survival. On the second evening, Gideon pulled out a map. It was hand-drawn, crude but detailed. Lines for ridges, X's for landmarks, notations in small, precise handwriting. We'll go south through Widow's Pass, he said, tracing the route with one scarred finger. It's longer than the direct route, but fewer places for an ambush. We stay in the trees, avoid open ground. Take us 3 days if the weather holds. And if it doesn't, then we die. He said it matter-of-factly. But the skies clear should stay that way for at least a week. Martha studied the map. The route looked brutal. Miles of mountain terrain, high passes, dangerous crossings. What about Voss's men? They'll be searching the main trails. Everyone uses Devil's Fang because it's fastest. We go the slow way. We might slip past them entirely. Gideon rolled up the map. Might. No guarantees. I'll take might over definitely dead. That night, Martha helped Gideon pack. 2 heavy canvas packs, 1 for each of them. Dried meat, hard biscuits, coffee, basic medical supplies. He rolled up extra furs, tied them to the outside of his pack. For sleeping, he explained. Can't risk a fire once we're moving, too visible. We'll have to stay warm the old way. Martha tried not to think about what that meant. 3 nights in the freezing wilderness with nothing but furs and body heat. She checked the satchel one more time. The ledger was still there, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture. 17 names, 17 reasons to keep going. You ready? Gideon asked. Martha looked around the cabin. It had been her sanctuary for over a week, the safest she'd felt since before her mother died. Part of her wanted to stay, to hide here forever. But hiding wouldn't stop Edwin Voss from killing, wouldn't give those 17 people justice. I'm ready, she said. They left at first light. The cold was brutal, worse than anything Martha had experienced during her training walks. Gideon set a steady pace, not too fast but relentless. He knew exactly where to step, where the snow would hold, where it would give way. Martha followed in his footsteps, literally, easier than breaking her own trail. Her pack dragged at her shoulders, heavy enough that she felt every pound. But she gritted her teeth and kept moving. They walked for 4 hours before Gideon called a halt. Drink, he said, handing her a canteen. Eat something. Keep your strength up. Martha gnawed on a strip of dried venison while Gideon surveyed the landscape. They were on a ridge now, trees thinning out. Below them the valley stretched white and empty. See that? Gideon pointed to a thin line of smoke rising in the distance. Camp. Maybe 2 miles east. Martha's heart stuttered. Voss's men? Probably. Or trappers. Hard to say from here. He lowered his arm. Either way, we give it a wide berth. Stay in the tree line. Keep quiet. They moved on. The sun climbed higher, but gave no warmth. Martha's thighs burned from the constant uphill climb. Her ribs ached despite being mostly healed. But she didn't complain. Just put one foot in front of the other, following Gideon's broad back through the wilderness. Around midday, they reached Widow's Pass. It was a narrow gap between two cliff faces, barely wide enough for a horse. Snow had drifted deep here, and Gideon had to break trail. Martha watched him work, powerful legs driving through the powder. He made it look easy. It wasn't. She could see the strain in his shoulders, hear his breathing grow heavier. Halfway through the pass, he stopped. "Listen," he said quietly. Martha froze. At first she heard nothing but wind, then voices, distant, echoing off the rock walls. "Behind us," Gideon whispered. "Maybe half a mile." "Can they see us?" "Not yet, but they're moving fast." He scanned the pass, jaw tight. "We need to get through this gap, now." They ran. Well, Gideon ran. Martha tried to keep up, her shorter legs struggling through the deep snow. The pack slammed against her back with every step. Her lungs burned, but she could hear the voices getting closer, echoing strangely through the pass. Gideon reached the far side first. He turned, reaching back for Martha. "Come on," he urged. "Almost there." Martha's boot caught on something buried in the snow. She pitched forward, going down hard. The impact knocked the wind out of her. "Get up," Gideon hissed. Martha tried. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. The pack had shifted, throwing off her balance. Then Gideon was there, hauling her upright with one arm. His other hand grabbed her pack, literally dragging her the last 20 feet to cover. They collapsed behind a boulder just as 4 men on horseback emerged into the pass. Martha pressed her face against the frozen ground, not daring to breathe. Gideon's hand covered her mouth, unnecessary, but she understood. Complete silence. The riders moved slowly through the deep snow, horses struggling. Martha could hear them talking, but the words were muffled by distance and wind. One of them stopped. "Tracks here?" he called out. Martha's blood turned to ice. Another rider moved closer. "Fresh?" "Yeah, real fresh. Maybe an hour old." Gideon's hand tightened on Martha's shoulder. His other hand moved to the knife at his belt. The men dismounted, started following the tracks, Martha and Gideon's tracks, through the pass. Gideon leaned close, his breath hot against Martha's ear. "When I move," he whispered, barely audible, "you run, north, through the trees. Don't stop, don't look back. I'll find you." "No, not a debate." The men were getting closer, maybe 50 feet away now, close enough that Martha could see their faces, hard, weathered, the kind of men who hurt people for money. One of them drew a pistol. Gideon rose to a crouch, every muscle coiled tight, and then the snow beneath the lead rider gave way. The man dropped with a scream, disappearing into a hidden crevasse. His horse panicked, rearing. The other riders shouted, trying to control their mounts on the unstable ground. "Now," Gideon breathed. They ran north, using the chaos as cover. Behind them, the men were screaming, one trying to save his friend, the others trying to keep their horses from following him down. Gideon led Martha into the thick tree cover, weaving between pines. They ran for 10 minutes, maybe 15, before he finally slowed. Martha bent over, gasping. Her side screamed. "Did they see us?" "Don't know, don't care. We need to put distance between us and them." He grabbed her hand. "Come on, we're not stopping until dark." They walked until Martha's legs felt like they'd give out, until her feet were numb and her lungs raw, until the sun dropped below the mountains and the temperature plummeted. Only then did Gideon call a halt. They were in a dense grove of pines, branches heavy with snow creating a natural shelter. Gideon swept snow aside with his hands, exposing a patch of frozen ground, laid out the furs. "No fire," he said. "Too risky. We share heat." Martha was too exhausted to be embarrassed. She collapsed onto the furs while Gideon arranged more over them. Then he lay down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Turn around," he said quietly. She did. Gideon moved closer, his chest against her back, one arm draped over her waist. Not sexual, just practical, survival. "Sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch first." But despite everything, the fear, the cold, the danger, Martha felt safe. Safer than she had any right to feel. Gideon's heartbeat was steady against her spine, his breathing slow and even. The arm around her waist was heavy, protective. Martha closed her eyes and impossibly slept. She woke to Gideon shaking her shoulder. "Quiet," he whispered. "Don't move." Martha's eyes snapped open. Dawn light filtered through the branches, and standing 30 feet away, rifle pointed directly at them, was a man she recognized from Helena, one of Voss's hired guns, a Pinkerton detective named Garrett, who'd once killed 3 men in a saloon fight and walked away without charges. "Well, well," Garrett said, grinning. "Edwin's going to be real happy I found you, Miss Calloway." Gideon's hand moved slowly toward his knife. "I wouldn't," Garrett said. "Got 2 more men in the trees. Move wrong, and you're both dead." Martha's heart hammered. This was it. They'd been caught. But then Gideon spoke, voice calm as frozen water. "You're alone," he said. Garrett's grin faltered. "What?" "No backup. You're bluffing." Gideon sat up slowly. "If you had men with you, they'd already be here. You're solo. Probably got separated from your group in that pass yesterday." "You don't know. I know you're scared." Gideon stood, hands visible but ready. "Know you're weighing whether you can get a shot off before I kill you, and you're not sure you can." Garrett's rifle wavered slightly. "Here's what's going to happen," Gideon continued, taking a step forward. "You're going to lower that rifle and walk away. Tell Voss you never found us." Or another step. "I take that rifle from you and beat you to death with it. Your choice." "I'll shoot you," Garrett said, but his voice shook. "Maybe, but I guarantee you won't kill me before I reach you. And then my friend here," Gideon nodded toward Martha, "shoots you with the pistol she's got pointed at your back." Martha's hand flew to the Colt at her belt. She hadn't even realized she'd drawn it, but there it was, hammer cocked, barrel aimed at Garrett. Her hand was shaking so hard the barrel wavered, but Garrett couldn't see that from where he stood. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Garrett lowered his rifle. "Smart man," Gideon said. He crossed the distance in 3 long strides, grabbed the rifle, and slammed the stock into Garrett's face. The man went down hard, blood pouring from his broken nose. Gideon stood over him, rifle pointed at his head. "Please," Garrett gasped. "Don't." "Should kill you," Gideon said quietly. "Probably will regret not killing you." He reversed the rifle and brought the stock down on Garrett's temple. The man crumpled, unconscious. Gideon tossed the rifle into the trees, then started stripping Garrett of anything useful. Ammunition, a knife, a canteen. "We need to move," he said. "He'll wake up in a few hours, find his friends. They'll know which direction we went." Martha was still holding the pistol, still shaking. "Hey!" Gideon touched her shoulder. "You did good, really good. I almost shot him. But you didn't. You stayed calm, followed my lead." He squeezed her shoulder. "That's what matters." They packed fast, leaving Garrett unconscious in the snow. As they walked away, Martha looked back once. The man was already starting to stir. "He'll tell Voss where we are," she said. "Yeah," Gideon agreed. "But by the time Voss organizes a proper hunt, we'll be in Helena. Just have to stay ahead of them." "And if we can't," Gideon's jaw tightened, "then we fight." They walked hard for the rest of the day, barely stopping. By nightfall, Martha's entire body was screaming, but Gideon said they'd covered good ground. We're maybe a day outside Helena now. That night, huddled under furs again, Martha couldn't stop shaking, not from cold, from fear, from the realization that she'd almost killed someone, that Gideon had beaten a man unconscious to protect her. "Talk to me," Gideon said quietly. "I don't know what to say." "Say what you're thinking." Martha was quiet for a long time, then, "I've never been violent before, never hurt anyone, but today I wanted to shoot that man, wanted to kill him before he killed us. That's survival, nothing wrong with it. It doesn't feel like nothing." Gideon shifted, propping himself up on one elbow. "You know what the difference is between you and men like Garrett, like Voss?" "What?" "They hurt people because it's easy, because they like it. You were willing to fight because you had no choice." His hand found hers in the darkness. "That's not the same thing." Martha held onto his hand like a lifeline. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know." "What if we don't make it? What if—" "We'll make it." Gideon's voice was iron hard. "I promise you, Martha. We'll get you to Helena alive, get that ledger to someone who can use it, and then—" He trailed off. "Then what?" Martha asked. Gideon was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Then you'll be safe, and I can stop being terrified of losing you." Martha's breath caught. In the darkness, she couldn't see his face, but she could feel the tension in his body, the way his hand tightened around hers. "Gideon, should have kept my mouth shut," he said. "Forget I said anything." But Martha didn't want to forget. Didn't want to pretend she hadn't heard the raw honesty in his voice. She rolled over to face him, could barely see his outline in the dark. "I don't want to forget," she said quietly. Gideon went very still. Martha's heart pounded. She'd never done this before, never made the first move, had never wanted anyone enough to risk rejection. But out here in the wilderness, with death hunting them and everything uncertain, she was done being afraid. "I'm losing control around you," Gideon said, voice strained. "Been trying to keep distance, keep this professional. But I can't stop thinking about—" He cut himself off. "You should sleep." "What if I don't want to sleep?" "Martha." She reached out in the darkness, found his face. Her fingers traced the scar along his jaw. "I've spent my whole life being told I wasn't good enough," she said softly. "Wasn't pretty enough, wasn't small enough, wasn't anything enough. And then you looked at me like I was strong, like I mattered. Do you know what that did to me?" "You do matter," Gideon said roughly. "More than you know. Then stop fighting this." For one heartbeat, two, Gideon didn't move. Then his hand came up to cover hers against his face, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "If I kiss you, I won't want to stop." "Good," Martha breathed. Gideon's mouth found hers in the darkness. The kiss was nothing like Martha had imagined kisses would be. It wasn't gentle or practiced or polite. It was desperate and hungry and real. Two people who'd been alone too long finally reaching for something warm. Gideon's hand cupped the back of her head, fingers tangling in her hair. Martha's hands found his chest, feeling the steady hammer of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gideon pressed his forehead against hers. "This is a bad idea," he muttered. "Probably. Complicates everything." "I know. Don't care," Gideon said, and kissed her again. They held each other under the firs, trading kisses and whispered words until exhaustion finally claimed them both. And for the first time in her life, Martha Calloway fell asleep in someone's arms, feeling not just safe, but wanted. Tomorrow would bring danger, violence, maybe death. But tonight, in the frozen wilderness, she'd found something worth surviving for. Martha woke to the sound of horses. Distant still, but unmistakable. The whicker of animals, the jangle of tack, men's voices carrying through the cold morning air. Her eyes snapped open. Above her, the sky was barely light, that thin gray that came before dawn. Gideon was already awake, crouched at the edge of their shelter with his rifle. His face was carved from stone. "How many?" Martha whispered. 6, maybe 7. He didn't look at her. "They found Garrett, picked up our trail." Martha's stomach dropped. She sat up, ignoring the protests from her stiff muscles. "How far?" "Half-mile. Moving slow because of the snow, but they're coming." Gideon finally turned to face her. "We need to run. Now." They packed in under 2 minutes, movement sharp and efficient. No time for food, barely time to roll the furs. Martha's hand shook as she strapped the satchel across her chest, but she forced herself to focus. The ledger. That was all that mattered. Gideon led them north at a punishing pace, away from the voices. The terrain got rougher. Steep slopes, exposed rock, snow that had frozen into ice overnight. Martha slipped twice in the first 100 yards. The second time, Gideon caught her before she went down. "Careful," he said. "Break an ankle out here and we're done." They kept moving. Behind them, the voices grew louder. The hunters were gaining ground. Men on horseback could cover distance faster than people on foot, even in deep snow. After an hour, Gideon stopped at the base of a near vertical cliff face. "Up," he said. Martha stared at the rock wall. "You're joking. Horses can't follow. It's our only chance." He was already finding handholds, testing the rock. "Stay close to me. Do exactly what I do." The climb was a nightmare. Every handhold was covered in ice. Every foothold threatened to give way. Martha's fingers went numb after the first 10 feet. Her pack dragged at her shoulders, trying to pull her backward into empty air. But Gideon climbed like he'd been born to it, finding routes Martha couldn't see. And every time she faltered, his hand was there, steadying her, guiding her to the next hold. "Don't look down," he said. "Just keep moving." Martha looked down anyway. The ground was 30 feet below now, maybe 40. If she fell, "Eyes up," Gideon barked. "Focus on the rock." She did. Hand over hand, foot after foot, her thighs screamed, her ribs ached where they were still healing, but she climbed. When they finally reached the top, Martha collapsed on her stomach, gasping. Below she could hear shouting. The hunters had reached the base of the cliff. "They're climbing!" one voice yelled. "Forget it," another responded. "Take too long. We'll circle around, cut them off at Devil's Fang." Devil's Fang. Martha remembered that from Gideon's map, the high pass that led down toward Helena. If the hunters got there first, "We need to beat them to the pass," Gideon said, reading her mind. He hauled her to her feet. "Can you run?" "Don't have much choice, do I?" Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. "No, you don't." They ran. The terrain was more open up here, the tree cover sparse. Easier to move fast, but also easier to be seen. Gideon kept them low when they could, using every ridge and depression for cover. Martha's lungs burned. Her legs felt like lead, but she kept pace, driven by the knowledge that stopping meant dying. Around midday, they crested a ridge and saw it, Devil's Fang Pass. A narrow gap between two massive peaks, the only route through the mountains for miles in either direction. And at the base of the pass, making camp, were 6 armed men. "Damn it," Gideon breathed. They dropped flat on the ridge, watching. The men were setting up, building a fire, tending horses, settling in like they had all the time in the world, which they did. Anyone trying to reach Helena had to come through that pass. All they had to do was wait. "Can we go around?" Martha asked. "Not without adding 3 days to the journey, and we're almost out of food." Gideon studied the pass, jaw working. "We have to go through." "That's suicide." "Probably, but it's our only option." He pointed to a spot halfway up the left side of the pass. "See that? Looks like a game trail, runs along the cliff face. If we can reach it, we might be able to slip past while they're watching the main route." Martha squinted. The trail was barely visible, a thin line of exposed rock on a nearly sheer face. One wrong step, and it was a 100-foot drop. "That's insane," she said. "Yeah." Gideon looked at her. "You got a better idea?" She didn't. They waited until dark. The men below built up their fire, laughing and passing a bottle. Confident. Why wouldn't they be? They had the high ground, the numbers, and all the time in the world. "Stay close," Gideon whispered as they started down toward the pass. "Make no sound. One rock falls. They hear it. We're dead." The descent was worse than the cliff climb. Steeper, looser rock, no light to see by. Martha felt her way down, trusting her hands and feet more than her eyes. They reached the game trail an hour later. Martha's heart sank when she saw it up close. It was maybe 2 feet wide in places, less in others. The rock was slick with ice. And the drop. "Don't think about it," Gideon murmured. "Just move." He went first, back pressed against the cliff face, feet testing each step. Martha followed, trying to match his movements exactly. Below them, maybe 50 feet down, the fire crackled. The men were still talking, voices carrying clearly in the cold air. "Voss is offering 5,000 for her," one said. "Dead or alive." "I want her alive," another responded and laughed. "Little fun before we hand her over." Rage flared hot in Martha's chest. She missed her next step. Her boots skidded on ice. For one terrible second, she was falling, arms windmilling, the void opening beneath her. Gideon's hand shot out, grabbed her coat, slammed her back against the cliff face. "Breathe," he whispered against her ear. "Just breathe." Martha's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Below, one of the men had stood up, looking around. "You hear something?" he asked. "Just the wind," another said. "Sit down." They stayed frozen for 5 minutes. 10. Finally, the man sat back down, attention returning to the fire. Gideon started moving again. Martha followed, every muscle tense. It took them 2 hours to traverse that trail. 2 hours of ice and darkness and the constant threat of falling. By the time they reached the far side of the pass, Martha was shaking so hard she could barely walk. But they'd made it. The hunters were behind them now. "Keep moving," Gideon said. "We're not safe yet." They walked through the night. No rest, no fire, just endless movement through the frozen wilderness. Martha stopped thinking about pain, stopped thinking about fear. Just put one foot in front of the other, following Gideon's broad back. Dawn found them in a narrow valley, surrounded by towering pines. Gideon finally called a halt. "We can rest here," he said. "Few hours. Then we push for Helena." Martha collapsed against a tree trunk. "How far?" 10 miles? Maybe 12? He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "We'll make it before nightfall if we move steady. And if those men figure out we got past them, then we better move faster than they do." They ate the last of their supplies, stale biscuits, a few strips of jerky. Not enough, but it was something. Martha's stomach cramped with hunger anyway. "Here," Gideon held out his canteen. "Drink. Stay hydrated." Martha took it, swallowing ice-cold water. When she handed it back, their fingers brushed. The contact sent a jolt through her, memory of the night before flooding back. The kisses, the whispered words, the feeling of being held like she mattered. Gideon must have been thinking the same thing because his expression softened. "About last night," he started. "Don't," Martha said quickly. "Don't say it was a mistake." "Wasn't going to." He looked at her, really looked at her, with those storm-gray eyes. "Was going to say I've never felt like this before. This terrified." "Of what?" "Of losing you." His hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. "I've lost everyone I cared about. My sister, my friends during the war, learned to stop caring because it hurt less. But you—" He stopped, jaw working. "Can't seem to stop myself with you." Martha's throat tightened. "I'm not going anywhere." "You don't know that. I don't know that. Hell, we might not survive the next 12 hours. His grip tightened. "But I need you to know, if something happens, if we get separated or nothing's going to happen." "Martha, no." She turned to face him fully. "I've spent my whole life preparing for the worst, expecting rejection, expecting pain. I'm done with that. We're going to make it to Helena. We're going to get this ledger to someone who can use it. And then—" She faltered. "And then what?" Gideon asked quietly. Martha hadn't let herself think that far ahead, hadn't dared to imagine a future beyond just surviving, but looking at Gideon now, she realized she wanted one. "And then we figure out what comes next," she said. "Together." Gideon's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "You really want to be stuck with a broken-down mountain hermit? You really want to be stuck with a woman society threw away? Society's an idiot." He leaned forward, pressed his forehead against hers. "And yeah, I really do." They sat like that for a long moment, just breathing together. Then Gideon pulled back. "We should move," he said. "Daylight's burning." They'd been walking for maybe 2 hours when they found the cabin. It was small, abandoned, half buried in snow. The door hung crooked on one hinge, but it was shelter, and when Gideon pushed inside, Martha saw a rust-stained stove and a pile of old firewood. "Someone's trapping cabin," Gideon said. "Hasn't been used in years by the look of it, but—" A horse whinnied outside. They both froze. Gideon moved to the window, peered out through a gap in the shutters. His entire body went rigid. "What is it?" Martha whispered. "Rider. Coming from the south." He drew his pistol. "Alone, looks like." "One of Voss's men?" "Can't tell yet." He motioned for Martha to get behind the stove. "Stay down. If this goes bad, you run. Don't look back. Just run." "I'm not leaving you." "That's an order, Martha." Before she could argue, the door crashed open. A man stumbled inside, older, weathered, with a thick gray beard. He saw Gideon's drawn pistol and raised his hands. "Easy," he said. "I'm not here to fight." "Who are you?" Gideon demanded. "Name's Caleb Morrison. I'm a friend." When Gideon didn't lower the pistol, Morrison continued, "Judge Brennan sent me. Got word you were heading this way with something important." Martha's heart leaped. "You know Judge Brennan?" Morrison's eyes found her. "You must be Miss Calloway. Judge said you'd have proof against Edwin Voss. Said it was worth protecting." "How'd you find us?" Gideon asked, pistol still leveled. Didn't. Was heading to my camp when I spotted smoke from Voss's hunting party. Figured anyone they were after might need help. Morrison slowly lowered his hands. Judge Brennan's in Helena right now. Got a federal marshal with him, man named Dutch Keller. They're ready to move against Voss soon as they have evidence. It sounded too good to be true. Martha looked at Gideon, trying to read his expression. You're lying, Gideon said flatly. Morrison's face didn't change. Why would I lie? Because Voss is offering $5,000 for her. That's a lot of money for a worn-out trapper. True. But I've known Marcus Brennan for 20 years, served under him during the war. I don't betray friends for money. Morrison's eyes were steady. You want to check my saddlebags? Go ahead. Got a letter from the judge. Has his seal on it. Gideon didn't move for a long moment. Then he gestured with the pistol. Get it? Slow. Morrison went to the door, pulled a leather bag off his horse, brought it inside and withdrew a folded paper sealed with wax. Gideon broke the seal, read quickly. His expression shifted. Surprise, then something like relief. It's real, he said quietly. Marcus's handwriting. His seal. He looked at Morrison with new respect. I'm sorry. Don't be. Smart to be careful. Morrison nodded to Martha. Miss Calloway, if you've got that ledger, I can get you to Judge Brennan safely. Got a route that avoids the main roads. Voss's men won't see us coming. Martha's hand went to the satchel. After everything, the running, the climbing, the constant fear, could it really be this simple? How long to Helena? She asked. 6 hours if we ride hard. Got an extra horse waiting a mile south. 6 hours. They could be in Helena by nightfall. Could hand over the ledger and end this nightmare. But something nagged at Martha. Something felt wrong. What about the hunting party? She asked. The men camped at Devil's Fang? Morrison waved a dismissive hand. They're behind you now. By the time they realize you slipped past, you'll be in Helena with federal protection. Gideon was already gathering their packs. We should move. Sooner we're off this mountain, the better. But Martha didn't move. That wrongness was growing stronger. Mr. Morrison, she said slowly, how exactly did Judge Brennan know we were coming this way? We didn't tell anyone our route. Morrison's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Like I said, the judge has resources. Figured you'd have to come through the Bitterroots to reach Helena from the north. That's a big area to cover. You just happen to be in exactly the right spot? Lucky timing. No. Martha's hand moved to the pistol at her belt. I don't think it was. Morrison's expression went flat. Miss Calloway, who told you we'd be here? Martha's voice was hard. Specifically here, at this cabin, right now. The silence stretched too long. Then Morrison drew. His hand flashed to his belt, pulling a hidden pistol. But Gideon was faster. He fired once, the shot deafening in the small space. Morrison staggered back, blood blooming on his shoulder. His pistol clattered to the floor. You shot me, he gasped, genuinely shocked. You drew first. Gideon kept his weapon trained on the older man. Who sent you? Really? Morrison laughed, the sound wet and painful. Clever girl. Voss said you were stupid, but you saw right through it, didn't you? Martha's stomach turned over. The letter was fake. Letter's real enough. Stole it off a courier last week. Morrison pressed his good hand to his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Voss has had men watching every route to Helena for days. When that idiot Garrett said you were heading for Devil's Fang, I rode ahead. Figured I'd play the friendly helper, get you to trust me. Then what? Gideon demanded. Then I take the ledger, put a bullet in both your heads, and collect $10,000. 5 for her, 5 for destroying the evidence. Morrison's laugh turned into a cough. Would have worked too if she hadn't been so paranoid. Not paranoid, Martha said quietly. Just tired of trusting men who want to hurt me. Gideon crossed the room, kicked Morrison's pistol away. How many others are out here? Enough. Voss has 20 men in these mountains, maybe more. All looking for you. Morrison's face was going pale. You're not getting to Helena alive, too many of us, too much money on the line. We'll see about that. Gideon grabbed Morrison's coat, hauled him upright. The older man screamed, Where's this extra horse you mentioned? Go to hell. Gideon shoved him against the wall, hard. The horse. Now. South, Morrison gasped, "Quarter-mile, tied to a pine with a white blaze on the trunk." "Is that true or another lie?" "It's true. Was going to use it to carry the ledger back." Morrison's eyes found Martha. "You know Voss won't stop, right? Even if you make it to Helena, even if you give that ledger to the law, he'll find a way to get to you." "Then I guess I'll have to make sure he hangs before he gets the chance," Martha said. Morrison laughed again, then coughed up blood. "Stubborn. Voss hates that." Gideon used strips torn from a blanket to tie Morrison's hands and feet, stuffed a gag in his mouth for good measure. "He'll freeze if we leave him here," Martha said. "Good." Gideon's voice was ice cold. "Man tried to kill us. I'm not losing sleep over what happens to him." They found Morrison's horse outside, a decent gelding, well-fed and rested, and a quarter-mile south, exactly where he'd said, was the second horse. "He was telling the truth about this part at least," Martha said. "Makes the lie more believable." Gideon checked the horse's tack, making sure it was sound. "You know how to ride?" "It's been a while, but yeah." "Good. Because we're going to ride hard and fast. No stops, no rests. We make Helena before dark, or we don't make it at all." They mounted up. Martha's horse danced sideways, unused to her weight, but she held on. Remembered the lessons from childhood, before her father sold the farm. How to sit, how to move with the animal instead of against it. Gideon led them south at a gallop, following routes that looked more like goat trails than roads. The horses struggled through deep snow, but they were strong animals, bred for mountain work. Behind them, maybe an hour later, Martha heard shouting, then gunshots. "They found Morrison," Gideon said. "They'll be coming fast now. Hold on." The next 3 hours were a blur of speed and terror. They rode through ravines and over ridges, jumped fallen logs and frozen streams. The horse's breath came in great white plumes. Martha's thighs burned from gripping the saddle. Her hands were numb from holding the reins, but they kept moving. Around mid-afternoon, they broke through the tree line onto a high plateau, and there, spread out in the valley below, was Helena. Martha had never been so happy to see a city in her life. "Almost there," Gideon said. "Just have to—" A rifle shot cracked through the air. Gideon jerked in his saddle. Red bloomed on his left side, just below his ribs. "No!" Martha screamed. More shots. She looked back and saw them. 6 riders, maybe 7, pouring over the ridge behind them. Voss's men, closing fast. Gideon swayed but stayed in the saddle. "Ride!" he gritted out. "Don't stop!" "You're shot!" "Ride! Damn it!" They rode. Down the slope toward Helena, the horses sliding on loose rock. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. One passed so close to Martha's head she felt the air move. Gideon was slumped forward now, barely holding on. Blood soaked his coat, dripping onto the horse's neck. Martha grabbed his reins, leading both horses. The city was getting closer. She could see buildings now, streets, people. Another shot. Her horse screamed and went down, legs buckling. Martha hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. The satchel strap tried to strangle her. She rolled, gasping, and came up with the pistol in her hand. The riders were 100 yards back. Closing. Gideon's horse had stopped, the mountain man barely conscious in the saddle. Martha ran to him, grabbed his coat. "Come on," she said. "We're so close, just a little further." "Can't," he mumbled. Blood flecked his lips. "Lost too much. You go. Run." "No." Martha's voice broke. "I'm not leaving you, not after everything." She got her shoulder under his arm, half dragged him out of the saddle. He was so heavy, but she was strong. Stronger than she'd ever believed. The riders were 50 yards away now. Martha raised the pistol with her free hand, fired twice. Missed both times, but the men slowed, taking cover. She started dragging Gideon toward the city. 20 feet. 30. A bullet hit the ground next to her boot. Then, impossibly, there were people running toward them. Men in long coats, one wearing a badge that caught the sun. "Federal Marshal," someone shouted. "Drop your weapons." The riders wheeled their horses, trying to flee. More men appeared, lawmen, soldiers, armed citizens. Gunfire erupted, but not aimed at Martha, aimed at Voss's men. Strong hands took Gideon from her. A woman's voice said, "You're safe now. You're safe." Martha's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the snow, still clutching the satchel. A man knelt beside her, older, with kind eyes and a federal marshal's badge pinned to his coat. Miss Calloway? He asked. I'm Dutch Keller. Judge Brennan sent me when he heard Voss had men in the mountains. He nodded to the satchel. Is that the ledger? Martha's hands were shaking too hard to open it. Marshal Keller did it for her, carefully removing the oilcloth-wrapped book. He opened it, read the first page, then the second. His expression went hard as granite. We've got him, he said quietly. After all these years, we finally got the bastard. Around them, Voss's men were being rounded up. Most had surrendered. 2 lay dead in the snow. Martha couldn't bring herself to care. Gideon, she said, the man who was shot. Doctor's with him now. Lost a lot of blood, but the bullet went through clean. He'll live. Keller helped her to her feet. You both will. It's over, Miss Calloway. You're safe. But Martha didn't feel safe. Wouldn't feel safe until she saw Gideon with her own eyes, saw him breathing and alive. They took her to a building in town, the federal courthouse, someone said, sat her in front of a fire with blankets and hot coffee. A doctor examined her, clucking over her bruises and her half-healed ribs. You're lucky to be alive, he said. I know, Martha whispered. Judge Brennan arrived an hour later. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady eyes that reminded Martha of Gideon's. Miss Calloway, he said, sitting across from her, I owe you an immense debt. What you've done, bringing this evidence at such personal risk. Where's Gideon? Martha interrupted. Gideon Hale. Is he alive? Resting. The bullet missed anything vital. He'll be sore for a while, but he'll recover. Brennan's expression softened. He saved your life multiple times from what Marshal Keller tells me. I know. Martha's hands tightened around the coffee cup. I want to see him. Soon. First, I need you to walk me through what's in this ledger. Every detail you can remember. Martha did. Told him about finding it in Voss's study, about the 17 murders, the bribes, the corruption. Brennan took notes, asked sharp questions, occasionally shaking his head in disgust. When she finished, he sat back. Edwin Voss will hang for this, he said quietly. I'll make sure of it personally. He has powerful friends. Not anymore. Not after this becomes public. Brennan tapped the ledger. I'll have federal marshals arrest him tonight. By morning, every newspaper in the territory will have this story. There's no amount of money or influence that can save him now. Martha wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe it was really over, but she wouldn't believe it until she saw Edwin Voss in chains. They let her see Gideon an hour later. He was in a small room above the courthouse, lying on a cot with his torso wrapped in white bandages. His face was pale, but his eyes were open. When Martha entered, those eyes found her immediately. You're alive, he said, voice rough. So are you. Martha crossed to the cot, sat carefully on the edge. They said the bullet went through clean. Hurts like hell, but I'll live. His hand found hers. You got the ledger to Brennan? I did. He's arresting Voss tonight. Gideon's expression was grim satisfaction. Good. Bastard deserves worse, but hanging will do. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red. What happens now? Martha asked quietly. Don't know. Never thought past getting you here alive. Gideon's thumb traced circles on her palm. What do you want to happen? Martha thought about the cabin in the mountains, about the peace she'd found there, about Gideon's steady presence, his rough kindness, the way he looked at her like she was strong. I don't want to go back to society, she said. Don't want to pretend to be something I'm not anymore. What do you want? Martha met his eyes. I want to go back to the mountains. With you. If that's something you'd want. Gideon's expression softened. He tugged her closer until she was lying beside him on the narrow cot, careful of his injury. Woman who destroyed Edwin Voss wants to live in my cabin? He murmured against her hair. Think I can manage that. Martha closed her eyes, breathing in the smell of him, pine and smoke and something uniquely Gideon. For the first time since this nightmare began, she let herself believe it might actually be over. Outside, federal marshals were riding toward Edwin Voss's mansion, and in a small room above the courthouse, 2 people who'd survived the wilderness together finally rested. Martha woke to shouting in the street below. She sat up too fast, immediately regretting it when her ribs screamed protest. Beside her on the cot, Gideon stirred, his hand automatically moving toward the pistol that wasn't there. "What's happening?" he muttered, still foggy from pain and exhaustion. Martha crossed to the window. Dawnlight was just breaking over Helena, and the street below was packed with people. Miners mostly, still wearing their work clothes, carrying torches and tools. Their voices rose in an angry chorus. "They're saying Voss is gone," someone shouted. "Ran like a coward in the night." Martha's blood went cold. She turned to find Gideon already sitting up, gritting his teeth against the pain in his side. "Help me up," he said. "You shouldn't be moving." "Martha, help me up." She got her shoulder under his arm, supporting his weight as he stood. His face went gray, but he stayed upright. Together they made it to the door just as Marshal Keller came striding down the hallway. "You heard," Keller said. It wasn't a question. "How?" Gideon demanded. "You were supposed to arrest him last night. We tried, got to his mansion around midnight. Place was empty, servants, guards, everyone gone. Voss cleared out hours before we arrived." Keller's expression was grim. "Someone tipped him off." Martha felt the world tilt. No, we were so close, but it gets worse." Keller pulled a telegram from his pocket. "Got this an hour ago. Voss withdrew $200,000 in gold from his bank yesterday afternoon. Chartered a private train heading east. He's running." "Then go after him," Martha said. "Chase him down before he gets away." "I've got men trying, but Voss has a 12-hour head start and unlimited resources. He could be anywhere by now. Denver, Chicago, even heading for the coast." Keller looked at Martha, something like pity in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Calloway. We should have moved faster." "Who told him?" Gideon asked quietly. "Who warned Voss we were coming?" Keller hesitated. "We're investigating, but Helena's a corrupt city. Could have been anyone, a clerk, a deputy, even one of the federal staff. Voss has been buying people for years." The anger that surged through Martha was hot and sharp. After everything, the running, the near death in the mountains, Gideon getting shot, Edwin Voss was just going to slip away like smoke? "What about the ledger?" she asked. "Can't you use it to—" "We will. Already sent copies to every federal office in the territory. Voss won't be able to operate his business empire anymore. His assets will be seized, his properties confiscated. Eventually, we'll track him down and bring him to trial." Keller's voice was meant to be reassuring. It wasn't. "But that could take months, maybe years. Men like Voss are very good at disappearing." Martha pulled away from Gideon, crossed to the window. Below, the crowd was getting larger, angrier. These were the miners Voss had exploited, the workers he'd endangered, the families of men who died in his unsafe mines. They wanted justice, and they were being told to wait. "There has to be something we can do," she said. "The best thing you can do is stay safe," Keller said. "Voss might be gone, but he still has resources, still has men loyal to him. You exposed him, Miss Calloway. Men like that don't forgive that." He left them with a promise to post guards outside their room, like that would help if Voss really wanted her dead. Gideon lowered himself back onto the cot, breathing hard. The movement had reopened something. Fresh blood was seeping through his bandages. "Damn it," Martha muttered, grabbing clean cloth from the washstand. "You shouldn't have gotten up." Had to know what was happening. He winced as she pressed the cloth to his wound. "This isn't your fault." "Feels like it is." "It's not. Voss ran because he's a coward, because he knows what's in that ledger will destroy him even if he escapes prosecution." Gideon caught her hand. "You did what you set out to do. You exposed him. That matters." "Does it? If he gets away with everything?" "He hasn't gotten away. Not really. His empire's collapsing. His name's ruined. Every lawman in the country will be looking for him." Gideon pulled her closer. "And those 17 people you wanted justice for? The whole territory knows their names now, knows what Voss did. That's not nothing." Martha wanted to believe him, but the taste of almost victory turning to ash was bitter in her mouth. A knock on the door interrupted them. Judge Brennan entered, looking like he hadn't slept at all. "Miss Calloway, Mr. Hale, I apologize for the early intrusion." He pulled a chair closer to the cot, sat heavily. "I'm sure you've heard about Voss." "Marshal Keller told us," Martha said. "Then you know he's fled. But there's more you should know." Brennan pulled out a folder, opened it. "We've been going through his financial records. The man didn't just run, he liquidated everything he could in the past 48 hours. Sold mining shares, called in debts, converted assets to cash and gold. How much? Gideon asked. Close to $500,000? Maybe more. Brennan's jaw tightened. Enough to disappear forever if he's smart about it. Martha's stomach churned. So he wins. In the short term, perhaps, but I didn't come here to deliver bad news. Brennan leaned forward. I came because I have a proposition, one that might give us leverage we currently lack. What kind of proposition? Gideon's voice was wary. Voss has a business partner, a man named Victor Granger, runs the competing mining operation in Helena, the one Voss has been trying to destroy for years. Brennan tapped the folder. The ledger documents 3 attempts on Granger's life, 2 sabotaged mine shafts, bribes to have his mineral claims invalidated. Granger's lost millions because of Voss. And, Martha prompted, and Granger wants revenge. More than that, he wants Voss's remaining assets. The mines that haven't been seized yet, the land holdings, the equipment. Brennan's eyes were sharp. He's offering to fund a private investigation, hire the best trackers, put up reward money, make sure Voss never feels safe anywhere. In exchange for what? Gideon asked. The original ledger, not the copies. Those stay with the federal authorities, but the original in Voss's handwriting with his seal on every page. Physical evidence that can't be disputed in any court. Brennan looked at Martha. It's your property, Miss Calloway. Legally, you have the right to decide what happens to it. Martha's mind raced. If I give it to Granger, what does that mean for the federal case? We still have copies, still have your testimony. The case goes forward regardless. Brennan paused. But with Granger's resources backing the hunt, we have a much better chance of actually finding Voss. The man has connections from here to New York. He can go places federal marshals can't. And if he finds Voss first? Gideon asked quietly. Before the law does? Brennan met his eyes. I suspect Mr. Granger's definition of justice might be more permanent than a trial. The implication hung heavy in the air. Martha thought about Edwin Voss, the way he'd looked at her like property, the 17 names in his ledger, the casual cruelty of a man who killed because it was convenient. Part of her wanted him dead, wanted him to feel the same terror his victims had felt. But another part, the part that had been raised by a mother who believed in law and order, hesitated. I need to think about it, she said. Brennan nodded. Of course, but think quickly. Granger's waiting downstairs, and every hour we delay is another hour Voss gets further away. He left the folder and departed. Martha stared at it like it might bite her. What are you thinking? Gideon asked. I'm thinking I'm tired of powerful men deciding who lives and dies. She picked up the folder, flipped through it. Pages of financial records, property deeds, business contracts. Granger wants Voss dead so he can take over the empire. It's not about justice. It's about profit. Probably true. Does that change anything? I don't know. Martha set down the folder. I came here to expose Voss, to make sure people knew what he'd done. I didn't come here to have him murdered. Even if murder's what he deserves? Even then, she looked at Gideon. What do you think I should do? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. When he spoke, his voice was measured. I've killed men, he said, in the war, after the war. Some deserved it, some didn't. And I can tell you that vengeance doesn't feel the way you think it will. Doesn't make the ghosts go away or heal the damage. He turned his head to look at her. But I also know that men like Voss don't stop unless someone stops them. And sometimes the law isn't enough. So what's the answer? There isn't one. Not a clean one, anyway. Gideon reached for her hand. But it's your choice. Not mine, not Brennan's, not Granger's. Yours. You're the one who risked everything to get that ledger. You decide what happens to it. Martha closed her eyes. She thought about Sarah Chen's 3 children, growing up without a mother. About a 14-year-old boy buried in a mine shaft. About all the families who'd never gotten answers or justice. And she thought about the crowd in the street below, angry, desperate people who'd been exploited for years while men like Voss got rich off their suffering. When she opened her eyes, she knew what she had to do. I want to meet with Granger, she said, but not to give him the ledger. Not yet. Gideon raised an eyebrow. What are you planning? Something risky, possibly stupid. Martha stood, straightening her shoulders. But if it works, We might be able to get Voss and destroy his ability to hurt anyone else. Ever again. Victor Granger was nothing like Edwin Voss. Where Voss had been smooth and polished, Granger was rough-edged and direct. He wore working clothes under his expensive coat, and his hands were calloused from years in the mines before he'd struck it rich. He stood when Martha entered the courthouse meeting room, nodding respectfully. "Miss Calloway, Judge Brennan said you wanted to speak with me." "I do." Martha sat across from him, Gideon settling carefully beside her. "I understand you want the original ledger." "I do. That book has evidence of crimes against my company, my workers, my family." Granger's voice was hard. "Voss tried to have me killed 3 times. Would have succeeded if I wasn't lucky. I want him to pay for that." "And you think killing him is payment?" Granger didn't flinch. "I think a man like Voss will never face real justice in a courtroom. Too many connections, too much money. He'll delay an appeal and eventually slip away. But if I find him first," he shrugged. "Let's say I believe in more direct solutions." "So do I," Martha said. "But I have a different solution in mind." She laid out her plan. Granger listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he sat back. "That's ambitious," he said. "Also dangerous as hell." "I know. If it goes wrong, you could end up dead. Both of you could." "I know that too." Granger studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not a kind smile, but one of grudging respect. "You've got stones, Miss Calloway. I'll give you that." He extended his hand. "All right, I'm in. But if this fails, we do it my way." Martha shook his hand. "Deal." The plan was simple in concept, complicated in execution. Voss had fled, but he hadn't disappeared entirely. Men with that much wealth and ego couldn't help themselves. They needed to maintain their status, their connections, which meant Voss would surface eventually, somewhere he felt safe. Martha's plan was to make him surface on their terms. Step 1. Make Voss think he'd won. Granger used his newspaper connections to plant a story. Federal case against Voss collapses. Key evidence deemed inadmissible. The article claimed the ledger had been obtained illegally, couldn't be used in court, and the entire investigation was falling apart. It was completely false, but it would look real enough to anyone reading from a distance. Step 2. Create bait too tempting to resist. Granger announced publicly that he was purchasing Voss's remaining Helena properties at bankruptcy prices. Made a big show of it. Celebration dinners, newspaper interviews, boasting about how he was building an empire on Voss's ruins. For a man like Edwin Voss, watching his rival profit from his downfall would be unbearable. Step 3. Wait for Voss to make a mistake. "He'll send someone," Martha said during one of their planning sessions. "Won't be able to resist. He'll want to know if the story's true, if he's really safe, and when his man arrives, we follow him back to Voss," Granger finished. "Hire the best trackers money can buy. Once we know where he's hiding, federal marshals move in." "And if he doesn't send anyone?" Judge Brennan asked. He'd been skeptical of the plan from the start, but had agreed to cooperate. "Then we've lost nothing," Martha said. "The real investigation continues either way." It took 3 weeks for the trap to spring. 3 weeks of waiting in Helena while Gideon healed and Martha tried not to go crazy with anxiety. She stayed in a boarding house under a false name, venturing out only when necessary. Granger had offered his mansion, but Martha had refused. Too visible, too obvious. Gideon stayed with her, against the doctor's orders. His wound was healing, but slowly. He moved stiffly, couldn't lift his left arm above his shoulder, but he refused to leave Martha's side. "You think I'm letting you do this alone?" he'd said when she tried to argue. "Not happening." On a cold morning in late November, a stranger arrived in Helena. He was well-dressed, careful, asked quiet questions in the right places, claimed to be a mining investor from Denver, but Granger's people spotted him immediately. They'd been watching for exactly this type of man. Marshal Keller had the stranger followed. For 2 days, the man moved through Helena, gathering information, talking to courthouse clerks, bribing newspaper editors, visiting the properties Granger had purchased. On the 3rd day, he left town on the eastbound train. 2 of Granger's best trackers were on the same train, 3 cars back. "Now we wait," Granger said. "See where he leads us." The wait was excruciating. Martha paced the boarding house room until Gideon threatened to tie her to a chair. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just kept replaying every possible outcome in her head. What if Voss wasn't where the tracker led? What if he'd already moved on? What if the whole thing was a trap in reverse, and Voss was luring them into something deadly? "You're going to worry yourself sick," Gideon said on the fifth night. He was sitting in the room's only chair, cleaning his pistol with methodical precision. "I'm already sick, with anxiety." "Come here." Martha crossed to him. Gideon set down the pistol and pulled her onto his lap, careful of his injured side. She settled against him, breathing in the familiar smell of him. "We're going to get him," Gideon said quietly. "One way or another, Voss is going to pay for what he did." "What if we don't? What if he gets away and I spent all this—" "He won't." Gideon's arms tightened around her. "I don't care if it takes months or years. We'll find him. I promise you that." Martha wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. The telegram arrived on the sixth day. Granger brought it himself, bursting into the boarding house with a grin that could have lit the whole territory. "Denver," he said, slapping the telegram on the table. "The bastards holed up in Denver. Fancy hotel under a false name, but my men confirmed it's him." Martha's heart nearly stopped. "You're sure?" "Positive. They watched him for 2 days before sending word. It's Voss." Granger's grin turned predatory. "Marshal Keller's already coordinating with Denver authorities. They'll move in tomorrow morning." Tomorrow. After weeks of waiting, justice was finally 24 hours away. But Martha had learned not to trust good news. "What if he runs again?" she asked. "The moment he sees law enforcement, he won't see them coming. Keller's coordinating with the Denver police chief personally. They'll surround the hotel, cut off every exit. Voss will be in custody before he knows what's happening." It sounded too easy, too clean. Martha looked at Gideon. He was frowning, clearly thinking the same thing. "I want to be there," Martha said. Granger's grin faded. "That's not a good idea." "I don't care if it's a good idea. I need to see this through. Miss Calloway, if something goes wrong, then I'll handle it, but I'm not sitting in Helena waiting for a telegram." Martha's voice was steel. "I survived the bitter roots in winter. I survived Voss's hunters. I can survive watching him get arrested." Granger looked at Gideon. "Talk sense into her." "Can't," Gideon said. "Already tried. She's as stubborn as I am." "Worse," Martha corrected. Granger sighed. "Fine. But you stay back when the arrest happens, behind the marshal's line. Agreed?" "Agreed." They took the next train to Denver. The journey was cramped and uncomfortable, the car packed with miners and businessmen. Martha kept her head down, afraid someone might recognize her. The newspapers had run her story. "Frontier woman exposes Silver Baron's crimes," complete with a sketch that looked nothing like her but close enough to make her nervous. Gideon stayed close, one hand always near his pistol. His wound was mostly healed, but Martha could see him favoring his left side. He shouldn't be traveling, should be resting somewhere safe. But he was here anyway, because she was here. They arrived in Denver after midnight. Marshal Keller met them at the station with 2 deputies. "Hotel's 3 blocks north," he said without preamble. "Denver police have men on every corner. Voss hasn't left his room in 2 days. Orders room service, stays inside. Probably thinks he's safe." "When do you move?" Martha asked. "Dawn. Before the hotel gets busy, we'll breach his door, take him before he can react." Keller's expression was grim. "But I need your word you'll stay back. Last thing I need is a civilian getting shot." "You have my word." They spent the rest of the night in a cheap hotel 2 streets over. Martha tried to sleep but couldn't. Just lay in the dark, listening to Gideon's breathing, counting down the hours until dawn. At 5 in the morning, Keller knocked on their door. "It's time." The Denver Palace Hotel was exactly what its name suggested. Opulent, expensive. The kind of place where men like Edwin Voss felt entitled to stay. Martha stood across the street with Gideon, watching federal marshals and Denver police take positions around the building. "3rd floor," Keller had told them. "Room 314. We go in quiet, surround the room, then breach on my signal." Martha's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her coat pockets, trying to stay calm. Beside her, Gideon was tense as a drawn wire. "Something feels wrong." "What do you mean?" "Don't know. Just wrong." His eyes scanned the street, the hotel, the surrounding buildings. "Too quiet. Before Martha could respond, Keller gave the signal. Marshals moved into the hotel. Martha counted seconds. 30, 45. A minute. Then gunfire erupted from the third floor. Martha flinched. Gideon swore, hand flying to his pistol. More gunshots, shouting. A window on the third floor shattered outward, glass raining onto the street below. He knew, Gideon said. Somehow, he knew they were coming. Marshal Keller appeared at the hotel entrance, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "He's barricaded," Keller shouted. "Has men with him, at least 4 armed guards. They're dug in and—" An explosion blew out 2 windows on the third floor. The concussion rattled every window on the street. "Dynamite!" someone screamed. "He's got dynamite!" Chaos. People running, police shouting, more gunfire from inside the hotel. Martha stood frozen, watching her carefully laid plan disintegrate. Then she saw movement on the hotel's roof. A figure in a dark coat moving fast toward the building's edge. Even from this distance, Martha recognized him. Edwin Voss. There, she grabbed Gideon's arm, pointing. "He's escaping!" Voss reached the roof's edge, looked down at the alley below. Then he jumped. Martha's breath caught. It was a 15-foot drop, maybe more. But Voss hit the ground rolling, came up running. 2 men in similar dark coats dropped down after him. Guards, still protecting him. "Stop him!" Keller was shouting, but most of his men were inside the hotel, dealing with the guards who'd stayed behind to hold them off. Voss disappeared into the alley. Martha didn't think, just ran. "Martha, wait!" Gideon's voice behind her, but she was already sprinting across the street. She hit the alley at full speed, saw Voss and his guards 50 feet ahead. They were heading for the main street where horses were tied. An escape plan, ready and waiting. Martha pulled the pistol from her coat. She'd practiced with it, back in Helena. Wasn't a great shot, but she could hit a target at close range. "Voss!" she screamed. Edwin Voss spun around. For a moment they just stared at each other. The man who'd tried to own her and the woman who'd destroyed him. Then Voss smiled. Actually smiled. "Martha," he said, like they were old friends meeting for tea. "You've caused me considerable trouble." "Good." Martha raised the pistol. Her hands were steady now. "It's over, Edwin. Federal marshals are everywhere. You've got nowhere to run." "Oh, I disagree." Voss gestured, and his 2 guards raised their rifles. "I have plenty of places to run, and plenty of resources to disappear with. This is just a minor inconvenience." "You're going to hang." "Am I? Based on what? A ledger you stole? Evidence obtained illegally?" Voss's smile widened. "My lawyers will tear your case apart. Even if I'm convicted, appeals will take years. And I have years. Have money. Have friends in places you can't imagine." Behind Martha, running footsteps. Gideon appeared at her side, pistol drawn. Then Marshal Keller with 6 deputies. Voss's guards tightened their grip on their rifles. For a moment, everyone froze. Mexican standoff in a Denver alley. Then Voss laughed. "You see? This is why I always win, Martha, because I'm willing to do what you're not." He looked at his guards. "Kill them, all of them." The guards raised their rifles. Martha fired first. Her bullet took one guard in the shoulder. He went down, screaming. Gideon and the marshals opened fire simultaneously. The other guard dropped, dead before he hit the ground. Edwin Voss ran. Martha chased him. She heard Gideon shouting her name, heard marshals yelling at her to stop. Didn't care. She'd come too far, sacrificed too much to let Voss slip away now. Voss burst out of the alley onto the main street, grabbed the reins of a waiting horse, swung himself into the saddle. For a man who'd spent his life behind desks, he moved with surprising agility. Martha raised her pistol, fired, missed. Voss kicked the horse into a gallop, heading for the edge of town. Then someone else fired. A rifle shot, clean and precise. The bullet caught Voss's horse in the chest. The animal went down hard, throwing Voss from the saddle. He hit the street and rolled, came up stunned and bleeding from a cut on his face. Martha turned. Gideon stood at the alley entrance, rifle to his shoulder. Smoke curled from the barrel. "Told you I was a good shot," he said. Marshal Keller and his deputies swarmed Voss, dragged him upright, slapped irons on his wrists. The Silver Baron struggled, shouting about lawyers and illegal arrest and due process. Nobody listened. Martha walked slowly toward him. The crowd that had gathered parted for her. Word had already spread about who she was, what she'd done. Edwin Voss saw her coming. His expression shifted from rage to something uglier. "You stupid girl," he spat. "You think this changes anything? You think you've won?" Martha stopped directly in front of him. She was breathing hard, heart pounding, but her voice was steady. "I think 17 people got justice today. I think your empire is destroyed and your name is ruined. I think you're going to hang, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." She leaned closer. "And I think you'll die knowing you were beaten by a woman you thought was worthless." For the first time, genuine fear flickered in Voss's eyes. "Get him out of here," Keller ordered. They dragged Voss toward a waiting police wagon. He was still shouting, still making threats, but his voice was already fading, becoming just noise. Martha stood in the street, watching him go. Around her, people were talking, congratulating her, asking questions, demanding details. She heard none of it. All she heard was the silence where Edwin Voss's power used to be. Gideon's hand found hers. "You all right?" Martha looked at him, at the man who'd saved her life, who'd fought beside her, who'd loved her when she couldn't love herself. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I am." The trial lasted 6 weeks. Martha testified for 3 days straight, walking the jury through everything in the ledger, every murder, every bribe, every crime Edwin Voss had committed. Voss's lawyers tried to break her, called her a thief, a liar, a woman scorned seeking revenge, tried to claim the ledger was forged, that Martha had fabricated everything. But then Victor Granger testified, and the families of the murdered workers, and miners who'd survived cave-ins caused by Voss's cost-cutting, and judges who'd been offered bribes. By the end, even Voss's lawyers looked defeated. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Edwin Voss to hang. Martha wasn't in the courtroom when the sentence was read. She was outside with Gideon, sitting on a bench in the cold December air. "It's done," Gideon said when Marshal Keller brought them the news. "Yeah," Martha said. "It's done." She expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, something. Instead, she just felt tired. "What happens now?" she asked. Gideon stood, offered his hand. "Now we go home." Home. Martha realized she'd been thinking of Gideon's cabin that way for weeks now. Not as a hiding place or a temporary shelter, but as home. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. "Yeah," she said, "let's go home." They left Denver the next morning before the newspapers could hound them for more interviews. Took the train back to Helena, then horses north into the Bitterroots. The mountains were deep in winter now, snow covering everything, but the route was familiar, and this time Martha wasn't running, she was returning. When they finally crested the ridge above Gideon's valley, Martha pulled her horse to a stop. Below, smoke rose from the cabin's chimney. Gideon had sent word ahead to a trapper friend to get the place ready. "You sure about this?" Gideon asked. "It's isolated, lonely, no fancy parties or society friends." Martha looked at him. "Did you miss the part where society spent my entire life telling me I wasn't good enough for them?" "Fair point. Besides," she urged her horse forward, "I've seen what civilized society does to people. Think I prefer the mountains." They rode down into the valley together. That night, sitting by the fire in the cabin that had saved her life, Martha finally let herself believe it was over. Edwin Voss was in a cell awaiting execution. His empire was destroyed. The 17 names in his ledger had become a rallying cry for reform across the territory. And Martha Calloway, the woman society had called worthless, had changed everything. "What are you thinking?" Gideon asked. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Gideon's arm came around her shoulders. Martha leaned into him, watching the flames dance. Outside, wind howled through the mountains. Inside, the cabin was warm and safe, and for the first time in her entire life, Martha felt at peace. The peace lasted exactly 3 weeks. Martha was splitting wood behind the cabin when she heard the horses, 2 of them moving slow through the deep snow. She froze, axe still raised, and looked toward Gideon. He was already reaching for the rifle propped against the cabin wall. "Inside," he said quietly. "No." Martha set down the axe but didn't move. "I'm done hiding." The riders emerged from the tree line. One was a young man in a federal courier's uniform, the other was Judge Brennan. Gideon lowered the rifle but didn't set it down. "Judge." Brennan dismounted stiffly, age and cold making his movements awkward. "Mr. Hale, Miss Calloway, I apologize for the intrusion. This couldn't wait for spring." Martha's stomach tightened. "What happened? Did Voss escape?" "No, he hangs in 4 days." Brennan pulled an envelope from his coat. "But there's been a complication, one that requires your immediate attention." They went inside. Martha poured coffee while Brennan warmed himself by the fire. The young courier stayed outside with the horses, giving them privacy. "Edwin Voss has a brother," Brennan said without preamble. "Silas Voss runs mining operations in California, considerably wealthier than Edwin was, and significantly more dangerous." "Never heard of him," Gideon said. "Most people haven't. Silas prefers operating in the shadows, but he spent the last month trying to overturn his brother's conviction. When that failed, he made a different move." Brennan set his coffee cup down. "He's filed a civil suit against you, Miss Calloway, claiming you stole his family's property, the ledger, and caused damages to their business empire. He's demanding compensation of $200,000. Martha's mouth went dry. "That's insane. I don't have that kind of money." "He knows that. The point isn't to collect, it's to destroy you. If you can't pay, he'll seize any assets you have. Your father's remaining property, any inheritance, even future earnings. You'll be in debt for the rest of your life." "Let him try," Martha said. "I don't care about money. It's worse than that." Brennan's expression was grim. "Silas has also put a standing bounty on your head. Not official, of course, but word on the frontier is that he's offering $10,000 to anyone who kills the woman who destroyed his brother. $20,000 if they make it look like an accident." The cabin suddenly felt very small, very exposed. Gideon was on his feet, pacing like a caged animal. "Then we run. Head north into Canada, somewhere his reach doesn't extend. And spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders?" Martha shook her head. "No, I'm done running." "Martha, I said no." She looked at Brennan. "There has to be another way." "There is, but you won't like it." Brennan pulled another document from his coat. "Silas Voss is a businessman. He understands leverage. If you had something he wanted more than revenge, he might be willing to negotiate." "What could I possibly have that he wants?" Brennan unfolded the document. 3 days ago, federal auditors discovered something interesting while going through Edwin Voss's holdings. A mining claim in the Bitterroots filed 20 years ago. The claim was never developed, but recent surveys suggest it might be sitting on one of the richest silver veins in the territory. Martha stared at him. "What does that have to do with me?" "The claim was filed in your mother's maiden name, Elizabeth Hartwell." Brennan's voice was gentle. "Your grandfather owned this land before he died. The claim passed to your mother, then to you when she died. Legally, you own mineral rights to approximately 1,500 acres of mountain territory." The world tilted. "I own a silver mine?" "Potentially. The vein hasn't been confirmed yet, but if it's real, you're looking at millions in value." Brennan tapped the document. "Edwin Voss knew about it. Was planning to marry you and take control of the claim. That's why he wanted you specifically, not just any woman to clear your father's debts." Martha felt sick. "So I was never just payment. I was an investment." "Yes." Brennan's expression was sympathetic. "But now that knowledge gives you power. Silas Voss wants that mine. If you offered to sell him the claim for a fair price with legally binding contracts that protect you from future lawsuits and bounties, he might accept." "And I lose a fortune," Martha said. "You lose potential wealth you never knew you had, in exchange for safety and freedom from debt." Brennan leaned forward. "I know it seems unfair, but sometimes survival means making compromises." Gideon had stopped pacing. "How much would she get?" "For the claim. I've been in contact with several mining companies. They'd pay anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 for unproven claims in that area. If Silas wants it badly enough, you might get $100,000. Brennan paused. "That's enough to live on for the rest of your life, both of you, comfortably." Martha looked at Gideon. He was watching her with those steady gray eyes, not pushing, not deciding for her, just waiting. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think you've already given up enough for justice. If this gets Silas off your back, lets you live without constantly watching for killers." He shrugged. "Money doesn't matter. You matter." Martha turned back to Brennan. "Set up the meeting, but I have conditions." "What conditions?" The sale has to include legal protections. No future lawsuits, no claims against me or my family. The bounty gets withdrawn publicly and permanently, and—" she paused. "Part of the money goes to the families of the people Edwin killed, Sarah Chen's children, the boy's mother, all of them. They deserve something for their loss." Brennan smiled. "I think that can be arranged." The meeting took place in Helena 2 weeks later. Silas Voss was nothing like his brother. Where Edwin had been charismatic and polished, Silas was cold and calculating. He sat across from Martha in Judge Brennan's office, flanked by lawyers, and regarded her with the expression of a man examining a business ledger. "Miss Calloway," he said, "I understand you're willing to discuss the Hartwell claim." "I am, under specific conditions." "I'm listening." Martha laid out her terms. Silas listened without interrupting, occasionally glancing at his lawyers. When she finished, he sat back. "You're asking a lot for an unproven claim." "I'm asking for my life, and the lives of 17 families who suffered because of your brother." Martha's voice was steady. "If that's too much for you, I'll develop the mine myself. See how much your brother's reputation costs you when I'm competing with your California operations." Silas's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or just recognition that she wasn't bluffing. $75,000, he said, "for the claim and all associated mineral rights, plus legal protections as outlined. The bounty will be withdrawn." $100,000, Martha countered, "and $50,000 of that goes directly to the victims' families. I'll take the remaining 50. That's outrageous. That's my offer. Take it or leave it." Silas studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded to his lawyers. "Draw up the contracts." The paperwork took hours. Martha read every word, Brennan at her side explaining the legal language. When she finally signed her name, her hand was cramping. But it was done. Silas Voss stood, buttoning his coat. "A pleasure doing business with you, Miss Calloway. I hope we never meet again." The feeling's mutual. He left with his lawyers. Martha sat in the empty office, staring at the contract that had just changed her life. "You did good," Brennan said quietly. "Gave up a potential fortune, but you're free now. Really free. Doesn't feel like freedom yet." "It will." He squeezed her shoulder. "Give it time." That night, Martha and Gideon stayed in the same boarding house where they'd hidden weeks before. But this time, they didn't hide. Ate dinner in the public dining room, walked through town without fear. "Feels strange," Martha said as they strolled past the courthouse. "Not looking over my shoulder. You'll get used to it." "Will I?" She stopped, looking up at him. "I've been running or fighting since the moment I found that ledger. Don't know how to just exist." Gideon pulled her closer. "Then we'll figure it out together. That's what happens now. We get to just live." The simplicity of it nearly broke her. Just live. After everything, that's what she'd earned. The right to wake up each morning without terror, to make plans beyond simple survival. "What do you want?" she asked. "Now that we can have anything?" Gideon was quiet for a moment, his scarred face thoughtful in the lamplight. "I want to wake up next to you every morning. Want to teach you how to track deer and identify edible plants. Want to sit by the fire at night and listen to you read from those books you're always buying." He paused. "I want simple, quiet. You and me in the mountains. That enough?" Martha's throat tightened. "Yeah, that's enough." They spent a week in Helena, handling the financial arrangements. Martha set up trusts for the 17 families, worked with Brennan to make sure the money reached them. Some refused at first, didn't want charity, but Martha insisted it wasn't charity. It was justice. The only kind they were going to get. Sarah Chen's oldest daughter came to thank her in person. She was 16, working in a laundry to support her younger siblings. "My mother would have liked you," the girl said. "She always said women had to fight harder for everything. You proved her right." Martha didn't know what to say to that, just hugged the girl and promised the money would be there when she needed it. On the 8th day, they rode back to the mountains. Spring was starting to break through the snow, small patches of ground showing through, streams running with melt. The world was waking up, and Martha felt like she was waking up with it. When they reached the cabin, Gideon helped her down from her horse. "Home," he said simply. Martha looked at the rough log structure that had saved her life, at the mountains rising behind it, still capped with snow. at the man standing beside her with scars and storms in his eyes. "Yeah," she said. "Home." That night, lying in Gideon's arms with the fire burning low, Martha finally let herself think about the future. Not just survival, but actual plans. Dreams. "I want to write about it," she said suddenly. Gideon's chest rumbled under her ear. "Write about what?" "Everything. Edwin Voss, the ledger, what happened to those 17 people. The newspapers got some of it right, but not all of it. I want people to know the whole story. People might not like what you write, might call you a troublemaker. Let them." Martha propped herself up to look at him. "I spent my whole life trying to be what other people wanted. Quiet, grateful, small. I'm done with that." Gideon's hand came up to cup her face. "Good. You were never meant to be small." They made love that night, not for the first time, but somehow it felt different. Less desperate, less like they were stealing moments before the world ended. This felt like a beginning instead of an ending. Afterward, Gideon traced the curves of her body with calloused fingers. "You know what I love about you?" he said quietly. "What?" "Everything society said was wrong. Your size, your stubbornness, your refusal to just accept things. That's what saved you. That's what made you strong enough to survive." His fingers found hers, laced them together. "You're exactly who you're supposed to be. Took me 38 years to figure that out about myself. You already know it." Martha's eyes burned. "I didn't always know it, but you do now. That's what matters." She curled against him, listening to his heartbeat. Outside, an owl called. Inside, the fire crackled and settled. "Gideon?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for pulling me out of the snow." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for giving me a reason to care again." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, safe. The seasons changed. Spring melted into summer. Martha planted a garden, vegetables mostly, but also flowers because she wanted something beautiful. Gideon taught her to fish, to track, to read weather in the clouds. She taught him to read better, worked through books with him by firelight. Letters came occasionally, brought by trappers passing through. One from Judge Brennan informing her that Edwin Voss had been hanged on schedule. Martha read it twice, waiting to feel something. Triumph, satisfaction, anything. Instead, she just felt tired. Voss was dead. His victims had some measure of justice, and the world kept turning. "You all right?" Gideon asked, watching her fold the letter. "Yeah, it's really over now, isn't it?" "Yeah, it is." Another letter came from Sarah Chen's daughter. She was using the money to attend school, planned to become a teacher. "So I can help other girls like my mother helped me," she wrote. "Thank you for making that possible." That letter Martha kept. Reread it when the nightmares came. And they did come sometimes. Dreams of being hunted through the snow, of Garrett's rifle pointed at her, of Voss's smile as he ordered her killed. On those nights, Gideon held her until the shaking stopped. Never told her it wasn't real, never dismissed the fear. Just held her and reminded her she was safe now. "Takes time," he said once. "The war's been over for years and I still dream about it sometimes. Brains don't heal as fast as bodies. Does it get better? Yeah, slower than you'd like, but yeah." He was right. As summer turned to autumn, the nightmares came less frequently. The fear that someone might still be hunting her faded. Life in the mountains developed a rhythm. Work and rest, seasons and weather, the simple satisfaction of building something that lasted. On a clear October morning, Gideon took her to a high meadow overlooking the valley. The aspens were gold, the air crisp and clean. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About making this official. You and me." He looked uncomfortable, like the words didn't come easy. "I know marriage papers don't mean much out here, but they mean something, and I want people to know you're mine and I'm yours, properly." Martha's heart stuttered. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Yeah, I am." He pulled something from his pocket, a ring carved from wood, simple and rough but beautiful in its way. "Made it myself, it's not much. It's perfect." Martha's vision blurred. Yes, of course, yes." Gideon slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, smooth wood against her skin. "I love you," he said. "Should have said that first, probably. But I'm not good with words. I love you, Martha. You're the bravest person I've ever known." "I love you too." Martha kissed him, tasting salt from her own tears. "You saved my life in every way a person can be saved." They were married a month later by a traveling preacher who served the remote mountain communities. Judge Brennan came, making the journey despite his age. Victor Granger sent an expensive gift, mining equipment, practical and thoughtful. A few trappers and their families attended, curious about the woman who'd destroyed Edwin Voss. The ceremony was simple. Vows exchanged in front of the cabin, no fancy dress or elaborate decorations. Just Martha and Gideon promising to love each other until death. When the preacher pronounced them married, Gideon kissed her like he'd never let go. The gathering afterward was small but warm. People brought food, music, stories. One old trapper stood up and toasted, "The woman who proved the frontier belongs to the brave, not just the brutal." Martha looked around at these rough, weather-beaten people who'd accepted her without question, who didn't care about her size or her past or what society thought of her. They cared that she was strong, that she'd survived, that she'd fought for justice. This was her community now, these mountains, these people, this life. That night, alone with Gideon in the cabin they now officially shared, Martha felt something settle deep in her chest. Not happiness, that was too simple a word, more like rightness, like all the scattered, broken pieces of herself had finally come together. "What are you thinking?" Gideon asked. He was lying beside her, one hand tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I was supposed to be married to Edwin Voss right now, living in some mansion in Helena, playing the obedient wife while he killed people." "But you're not." "No, I'm here instead, with you, in a cabin that doesn't even have glass windows." She laughed. "Society would say I made the wrong choice." "Society is still an idiot." "Yeah, it is." Martha rolled to face him. "You know what's funny? I spent my whole life being told I wasn't good enough. Too big, too stubborn, too much. And then I found this place where being tough and strong and stubborn are the things that keep you alive, where being too much is exactly enough." Gideon's hand cupped her face. "You were always enough. Took you finding the right place to see it. Took me finding the right person." They held each other as the fire died down and the stars came out. Outside, the first snow of winter started to fall, gentle flakes that caught the moonlight. Winter came hard that year. Storms buried the cabin for days at a time. But Martha wasn't afraid. She knew how to survive now, knew how to read the weather, manage supplies, keep the fire going, knew that Gideon would be there when she woke up, steady and solid as the mountains themselves. On the darkest days of January, she started writing. Not a novel or a history, just her story. What happened, why it mattered, what she'd learned. She wrote about Edwin Voss and the 17 people he'd killed, about running through the mountains and nearly dying, about Gideon pulling her from the snow. She wrote about learning that strength came in forms society didn't recognize, that a woman's worth wasn't measured by her waist size or her ability to smile at cruel men, that justice sometimes required people willing to risk everything for strangers they'd never meet. The pages piled up through winter. Gideon read them sometimes, offering quiet observations. "You made yourself sound braver than you felt," he said once. "I was terrified the whole time." "I know, but you did it anyway. That's the definition of brave." When spring finally broke, Martha had over 200 pages, a complete account of everything that had happened. She sent it to a publisher in San Francisco, one known for controversial material. Got a response 3 months later. They wanted to publish it, thought it would sell. The book came out in late 1877, The Ledger, One Woman's Fight Against Corruption in the Montana Territory by Martha Hale. It caused exactly the kind of trouble Martha hoped it would. Newspapers across the country picked up the story. Reformers used it to argue for better mining regulations, for protections for workers, for consequences for wealthy men who thought they were above the law. Some people called Martha a liar, said she'd exaggerated or made things up. But too many witnesses corroborated her account. Too many documents supported her claims. Edwin Voss's empire was already destroyed. The book made sure it stayed that way. Letters arrived at the cabin, dozens of them, from people Martha had never met. Women, mostly, thanking her for telling a story about a woman who fought back, who survived, who proved that being dismissed by society didn't mean you were worthless. One letter came from a young woman in Boston. I was engaged to a man like your Edwin Voss, she wrote. Your book gave me the courage to break the engagement. I don't know what happens next, but I know I'm not marrying him. Thank you for showing me that running can be the bravest choice. Martha kept that letter too. Read it when doubt crept in, when she wondered if telling her story had been worth the invasion of privacy, the criticism, the way people now recognized her name. You helped her, Gideon said when she showed him the letter. Probably helped a lot of people you'll never meet. That matters. I just told the truth. Exactly. That's all anyone can do. The years passed. Martha and Gideon lived simply. The money from the mine sale sat mostly untouched in a bank in Helena. They didn't need much. The mountains provided meat, the garden provided vegetables, and what they couldn't make or grow, they traded for with trappers. They were happy. Not in some fairy tale way. They argued sometimes, got frustrated with each other, had bad days and hard winters. But underneath it all was something solid, something that didn't break. On Martha's 30th birthday, Gideon surprised her with a gift, a piece of paper, official and legal. I bought the land, he said. The 1,500 acres where your mine claim was. Bought it from Silas Voss's company. It's ours now, really ours. Nobody can take it. Martha stared at the deed. You bought a mountain? Bought our mountain. Figured we should actually own the place we call home. She kissed him hard. You're ridiculous. Yeah, well, you married me anyway. They built a life that would have horrified the society Martha had escaped. She wore men's clothes most days because they were practical. Let her hair grow long and wild because there was nobody to judge her for it. Got strong from physical work, scarred from accidents, weather-beaten from mountain living. And she'd never been more beautiful. Not by society's standards, maybe, but by her own. People still talked about her sometimes. The woman who'd destroyed Edwin Voss. The frontier legend who'd survived the Bitterroots in winter and lived to tell the tale. But in the cabin deep in the mountains, Martha was just herself. Wife to a mountain man. Writer, survivor. Woman who'd learned that being too much for some people just meant finding the right people to be enough for. On a summer evening 10 years after everything had started, Martha sat on the cabin's porch watching the sunset paint the peaks gold. Gideon sat beside her, gray in his hair now, moving a little slower but still strong. You ever regret it? He asked. Giving up that potential fortune? The mine could have made you richer than Voss ever was. Martha thought about it, really thought about it. No, she said finally. Money would have just complicated things, brought attention we didn't need. This is better. This was the cabin, the mountains, the life they'd built together. Simple, quiet, theirs. What about you? Martha asked. Ever regret pulling a half-frozen woman out of the snow? Gideon's hand found hers. Not once. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out. An owl hooted in the distance. The wind whispered through the pines. Martha thought about the girl she'd been, afraid, ashamed, convinced she was worthless because society said so. And she thought about the woman she'd become, strong, free, loved. The journey between those two people had been brutal, had nearly killed her, but it had also remade her into something better, something real. I love you, she said to Gideon. I love you too. He squeezed her hand. Think we should head inside? Getting cold. In a minute. I want to watch the stars a little longer. So they sat together, two scarred survivors who'd found each other in the wilderness and decided to stay. The world kept spinning. Somewhere people were fighting for power and wealth, hurting each other in the name of progress. But up here in the mountains, Martha and Gideon had found something better. Peace, home, love. And for them, that was more than enough. Years later, when Martha was old and gray, people would still ask her about Edwin Voss, about the ledger and the trial and the dramatic chase through Denver. But what Martha remembered most wasn't the danger or the fear. It was the moment after, lying in Gideon's arms in the cabin, realizing she'd survived, that she was safe, that she was loved exactly as she was. That was the real victory. Not destroying Voss's empire or publishing a book or becoming a frontier legend. The real victory was learning that she'd been enough all along. The world just needed to catch up. And somewhere in the Bitterroot Mountains, in a cabin that had witnessed both near death and rebirth, Martha Hale lived out her days knowing exactly who she was. Strong, stubborn, unbreakable, too much for some people, perfect for the right one. and absolutely, completely free.